Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Vancouver City Council meeting of Tuesday, May the 20th, 2025. This council meeting is being convened in person and by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw. City of Vancouver electronic meetings, as such, council members and the public may participate in person or by electronic means. Video of council members speaking, presentations, and vote results will be projected on live stream when available. In the case of an emergency where you need to evacuate the building, I'd like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits in this chamber. And please remember to use the stairs, not the elevators. If you require accessibility assistance, please remain at your location and wait for one of our security team members to help you out. There's also a defibrillator at the end of the hall if we need it. I do want to acknowledge that we're hosting today's council meeting on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and I want to thank them for their generosity and their hospitality and the loving care they show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. I also want to recognize the incredible contributions of all our team members that choose to work at the City of Vancouver every single day. You guys are incredibly amazing. So with that, can we please have a roll call?
Mayor Sim in the chair, Councillor Kirby-Young, Councillor Dominato, Councillor Bly, Councillor Fry, Councillor Montague, Councillor Klassen, Councillor Meisner, Councillor Joe,
Present.
Councillor Orr, Councillor Maloney. This meeting has quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Now, what we're going to start off with the first thing today is a proclamation. So today we gather to honor the memory of the passengers aboard the Gurananak Jahaz, or more commonly known as the Komagata Maru, a ship that arrived in Vancouver's harbor on May the 23rd, 1914, carrying hopeful British subjects from Punjab who were denied entry under exclusionary and discriminatory immigration policies. This event marks a profoundly troubling chapter in our city's history, one in which racism and exclusion triumphed over justice and compassion. By proclaiming Guru Nanak Jahaz, or the Komagata Maru Remembrance Day in the City of Vancouver, we not only acknowledge these past injustices, but also reaffirm our commitment to advancing a more inclusive, equitable, and just society. The city continues to work in close partnership with the South Asian community to address systemic racism, support reconciliation, and foster a city in which all residents feel a genuine sense of belonging. I'm now going to join my council team members up front, and we are going to read a proclamation. Good morning again. Good seeing everyone, by the way. You know, I'll just add a couple other comments. I think we've had this conversation a few times, but I think it's super important to reiterate it. Firstly, these are all my team members here. And while we may not agree on, everything, I think the one thing we can agree on is the fact that the Komagata Maru, the incident that happened in 1914, was a terrible incident, as we all know. And we stand here united in telling the story and supporting, Sikh heritage. And I know it's not just Sikh; it's also Muslim and Hindu, people of the Hindu faith that were affected by the Komagata Maru. But we stand united here, supporting the community. And one of the things that was important for this chamber, our administration, was making sure that there was also a secondary street naming at Komagata Maru Place. And it was super important it actually happened at Canada Place because it wasn't just ticking a box and putting a street name somewhere. It was actually important that it was there where millions of tourists, millions of visitors come to Vancouver every single year, and we can tell the story. And so with that, we are more than excited to read the proclamation as a team. We just get started here.
Whereas 2025 marks the 111th anniversary of the Guru Nanak Jahaz Komagata Maru incident, in which a ship carrying 376 British subjects from Punjab, including 346 24 Muslims and 12 Hindus, arrived in Vancouver's Burrard Inlet on May 23, 1914, and with the exception of some returning passengers, was denied entry into Canada.
And whereas passengers had valid documents and sufficient funds to pay a discriminatory head tax and endured 2 months on board in poor, unsanitary conditions, often going for days without food and water. Despite pleas for help, authorities did not respond.
And whereas the passengers, aided by the local South Asian community, engaged in a legal battle led by Gurdeep Singh and their lawyer, Joseph Edward Bird, the South Asian community organized protests and fundraisers to support them.
And whereas on June 29, 1914, Vancouver City Council openly supported the racist and discriminatory law by passing a resolution stating it was unalterably opposed to the admittance of Hindus and other erratic races into this country. The resolution also claims that these British subjects would pose a serious threat to civilization, both economically and socially. The Council conveyed this sentiment to the Premium of British Columbia via telegram.
And whereas the British Columbia Court of Appeal ruled against the passengers, leading to their forced return to India. On July 23, 1914, the Komagata Maru, named Guru Nanak Jahaz, was ordered to sail back to India, where those on board were labeled as political disruptors. Tragically, 19 passengers were shot and killed by British Indian troops, many were injured, and many others were jailed for years.
And whereas many descendants of these passengers later immigrated to Canada, settling in Vancouver, and continued to fight against discriminatory laws. This included advocating for the right to work in a profession of their choosing, holding public office, and the right to vote, which was granted in 1947.
And whereas on May 23rd, 2021, Vancouver City Council officially apologized for its 1914 resolution and the harms it caused. In 2023, Komagata Maru Place was revealed as a secondary honorary name of Canada Place to acknowledge the victims, their descendants, and all affected by the tragedy.
And whereas the City of Vancouver is dedicated to addressing inequities, including racial discrimination in all its forms, and it is committed to ongoing redress work with South Asian Canadian communities to address historical discrimination against people of South Asian Canadian descent in Vancouver.
Now, therefore, I, Ken Sim, the Mayor of the City of Vancouver, on behalf of all of the elected officials and everyone who chooses to work at the City of Vancouver, do hereby proclaim May the 23rd, 2025 as Guru Nanak Jahaz Komagata Maru Day of Remembrance in the City of Vancouver. That's good. You guys can clap. It's all good. Woo! Now, I would like to invite a couple of friends, Raj Singh Tour from the Komagata Maru Descendants Society, and Manam Shergill from the Sikh Heritage BC to say a few words.
Thank you. My name is Raj Singh Toor, and I'm the grandson, one of the passengers on the Komagata Maru. Grandfather name was Baba Poon Singh Jinetpura. And also I'm a vice president and spokesperson for the descendants of the Komagata Maru Society. And on behalf of the descendants of the Komagata Maru Society request, which was written by me, the City of Vancouver apologizes for their role in the Komagata Maru incident and also declare May 23rd as a Komagata Maru ambassador in the city of Vancouver. Also, it was my 6-year advocacy, and city of Vancouver did a Canada place named to Komagata Maru Place 1914 Guru Nanak Jahaj. Thank you very much for doing that. And also, I would like to say thank you to the respected Mayor Kensim and the councillors and all the city staff for recognizing the Komagata Maru passengers and proclaim May 23rd, 2025, Guru Nanak Jahaj, Komagata Maru Day of Remembrance in the city of Vancouver. Thank you very much for doing that. And it's a great tribute to those passengers who suffered a lot during the tragedy. We can't undo the past, but we can move forward and leave a legacy for the future generations by educating them of the past. And this is a very good learning tool to connect the Canadians, British Columbians, and Vancouver residents, their past, to make a more peaceful and tolerant tomorrow. My grandfather used to say that one day you can be rich, next day you can be poor. Somebody can take away your money, somebody take away your land, but nobody can take away you from you. That's your education. You must educate yourself. You must You must give education to your children. If you give more education to the society, the less discriminations there will be. Thank you.
Thank you to Mayor Sim and the entire Vancouver City Council. My name is Monam Kaur-Shergill, and I'm here on behalf of the Sikh Heritage Society of British Columbia. Days like today are a profound and important way to recognize how far we as a society have come when it comes to advocating for equal rights, justice, and humanity for all people, irrespective of place of origin, of race, of religion, or ethnicity. I think it's a strong testament to the dedication of this council and this mayor and the city of Vancouver as a whole to making sure that this city is welcoming to those who choose to call it home and that it truly embodies what it means to be Canadian, which is to come together to celebrate our wins and our strengths and to also recognize where we've erred in the past. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to come together today to recognize how far we've come, but also to acknowledge how far we have left to go. And I know that we can count on the City of Vancouver to stand with us as a community and alongside other community organizations as well, to make sure that this is one step in the right direction, but that this is only the beginning and not the end of this journey. Thank you.
Justice Rico, maybe we'll take a photo or two. Alrighty. Okay, so the plan for the day, any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the WebEx form, or sorry, the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be posted on X at Van City Clerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including the utmost respect for all genders. I remind council that when addressing speakers and the city's team members, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. Today, we have 3 administrative items: in-camera motion, adoption of minutes and matters adopted on consent, 1 communication, 4 reports and 9 referral reports, 8 bylaws, notice of council member motions, new business, and inquiries and other matters. So the plan for today, we will break at noon for lunch, followed by the in-camera meeting, return at 3 p.m. to continue to deal with the remainder of the agenda, adjourn or recess by 5 p.m. as we have a public hearing at 6 p.m. If we recess, the reconvene date is Thursday, May the 22nd, 2025 at 3 p.m. In camera, council is required to meet in camera later this week. The reasons and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed below. Would someone like to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. I think I saw Councillor Bly's hand up as a seconder. All those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. Minutes. Minutes 1 are from the council meeting on May the 6th, 2025. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Would someone like to move adoption? Great, Councillor Bly, seconded by Councillor Klassen. All those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. Minutes 2 are from the council meeting following the Standing Committee on Policy and Strategic Priorities on May the 7th, 2025. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Meisner, sorry, and Councillor Orr seconded. All those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. Minutes 3 are from the Special Council considering a bylaw to amend zoning and development bylaw number 3575 to rezone an area to CD-1 and consequential amendments to bylaws of May the 7th, 2025. Wow, that was a mouthful. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Would someone like to move adoption? Councillor Joe, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Klassen. All those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. So now we'll deal with matters adopted on consent. We have communication number 1, reports 1 through 4, and referral reports 1 through 9 on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Council may adopt the recommendations for communication 1, reports 1 through 4, and referral reports 1 through 9 on consent. Does any member wish to hold any of the items for debate or questions to team members? And I see a whole bunch of people in the queue. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to hold report 3, the 2025 municipal by-election review.
Okay. Councillor Bly.
Thank you. I'd like to hold report 4, report back review of City of Vancouver committee structures and systems.
Okay, report 4. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Report 2 for questions.
Sorry, which report?
2.
Report 2. Thank you very much. Councillor Maloney.
Report number 1, single room occupancy upgrading grants.
All right. Okay, before we consider the, oh, there's more. Councillor Orr.
Referral report number 2.
Referral report number 2. Okay. Thank you. Before we consider anyone else? Seeing no one else in the queue, before we consider the consent agenda, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare it. Does anyone have a conflict to declare? Okay, just bear with me for a second. I just got to do that math here. So. Okay. According to my records here, we have communication number 1 and referral reports 1 and 3 through 9 for the consent approval. I'm seeing some head nods, yes, so we're good here. Would someone like to move adoption of the recommendations before council contained in the communication and the referral reports? Great, Councillor Klassen, Councillor Meisner seconded. All those in favor say yay. All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. So the following have been approved on consent. Communication number 1, the 2025 Mayor's Budget Task Force Implementation Oversight Committee meeting schedule additional meetings. And then referral report number 1, CD-1 rezoning 325 East 6th Avenue. Referral report number 3, CD-1 rezoning 2267 through 2275 West 7th Avenue. Referral report number 4, CD-1 rezoning 1270 through 1290 West 11th Avenue. Referral report number 5, CD-1 rezoning 2158 through 2170 West 1st Avenue. Referral report number 6, CD-1 rezoning 1665 through 1685 West 11th Avenue. Referral report number 7, CD-1 887 text amendment 675 Pacific Street. Referral report number 8, CD-1 rezoning 469 through 483 East 10th Avenue. And referral report number 9, CD-1 rezoning 1110 through 1160 West King Edward Avenue. Okay, so communications. Okay, so the first report we have is report number 1, single room occupancy SRO upgrading grants. Now, before we begin this agenda item, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare it. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare? All right. Seeing no one in the queue, we'll move along. This item does not have a presentation, and Councillor Maloney, you held this item, so you have up to 5 minutes to ask team questions of team members. Please go ahead.
So I'm pleased that this investment in the upgrade of SROs is planned. I am a little bit concerned about the amount in comparison to the need for upgrading SROs, and I'm aware that it was given as one of the reasons for pausing net new supportive housing approvals was the condition of SROs. Can you expand on the plans for getting our current SROs in good enough condition that we can resume approving supportive housing?
Good morning, Celine Mobless, Managing Director of Housing and Homelessness Services. Our SRO grants, the program came into effect in 2014 as part of the Downtown Eastside Local Area Plan. And basically, the SRO upgrading grants is through a partnership with nonprofits, and we target our funds to nonprofit-owned and operated buildings, some with a subsidy from BC Housing, to basically improve condition and maintain affordability. And so the grants are done on a rolling intake basis, and we really work with the nonprofits, and if they have a project that needs some support, obviously buildings, many SROs are in need of replacement with self-contained social housing. So these grants are really to support general livability and improve lives for tenants while maintaining affordability.
So which city programs would need to be augmented to fast track the improvement of SROs to bring them up to an adequate standard and have all the SROs that are available occupied?
Right. We have a number, there is a general council policy to replace them with self-contained social housing. That is a long-term strategy. It will take significant investments from senior government. About half the stock is government-owned and the other stock is privately owned. So we do have a number, we will be reporting back to council on an intergovernmental investment framework that we've been developing. But really, it is a very long-term goal and will require significant investment. The SRO upgrading grant is really an interim measure. So how do we maintain livability and affordability while we're waiting for that longer term replacement? That longer term replacement will require substantial investment from senior government.
And do you have any, when you say long term, are you talking 10, 20, 30 years?
Plus, yes.
Plus.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have roughly 160 buildings that would need to be replaced. I believe since the plan, Downtown Eastside Plan was adopted, we've redeveloped less than 10.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. You just triggered with one question for me, Celine, which is when do we expect that report back?
We will be reporting back as part of the Uplifting the Downtown East Side later this year.
Do you have an idea of when?
November.
Okay. Okay, that's great. And my second question is, how do we report these investments to the province, or do we at all, in terms of ongoing financial subsidy and support in order to maintain this stock? How does the province find out about that city investment?
Any of the requests that are made to the city, we discuss them with the province to look to see what their contribution and partnership might be in the project. So they're aware of all of the investments that we are making in SROs.
Okay, and this may have been noted in the report, so forgive me if I missed it, but are we seeing that there's a certain amount of provincial funding as well as city funding targeting one particular building that's requiring these upgrades? Or are we finding that these operators are mainly depending on city funding right now for capital upgrades?
Our goal is to support nonprofit-owned SROs. So ones, they might be receiving some operating funding from the province, but are needing to maintain their own buildings. So we're prioritizing our funding for city-owned, nonprofit-owned buildings, and really look to the province for the buildings that they own, that they're making those capital repairs and investments.
Okay, and can you just remind us that the not-for-profit owned buildings are different than privately owned buildings?
Correct, yes.
And then are we finding that that the grants that are being sought after by the not-for-profit operators and building owners correlate with standards of maintenance calls that we may find we get, where it's being identified by either tenants or others that upgrades are needed in terms of upholding our standards of maintenance bylaws?
Yes, we're looking to that, as well as we've allocated some funding in order to support nonprofits to meet the new fire bylaw regulations. So it is around standards of maintenance, bylaw compliance, and then just general kind of wear and tear, door frames, locks, things like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Awesome. And so we got that. Councillor Bly moved it. Councillor Kirby-Young second the motion. Councillor, is there any discussion? Seeing no one else, no one in the queue, let's put it to a vote. Clerk, can you please take us to the voting screen? And if people can register their vote, that would be great. Great. All right. And so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. The next item on the docket is number 2, appointment of childcare operators, lease approvals, childcare grant approvals, and new lease agreements for 2 existing childcare centers. Before we begin this agenda item, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now's the time to declare it. Does anyone have a conflict to declare? Councillor Kirby-Young, you're in the queue. Is that for later? Okay, great. So I don't see any conflicts here. This item does not have a presentation. So Councillor Kirby-Young, you did hold this item, so you do have 5 minutes to ask questions of team members. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Mayor. Really appreciated this report. It did raise a couple of quick clarifying questions for me. And the first one, recognizing that the city has really stepped up here and we have 3,000, great to see we have 3,000 spaces in the pipeline towards our gap of 7,200, but it's the primary responsibility of the province. I'm just wondering if you can speak to me about recommendation E, which speaks to the city also providing grants for the maintenance. And I'm just interested on the history of that one, given that most of these are operated by nonprofits and receive some provincial operating funding, I believe, as to what the precedent is around the city funding the operating cost? I know that we have provided land and in some cases capital and built out a number of these childcares or through development contributions. But I'm just curious around the context of supporting the ongoing maintenance piece.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Mark Pickersgill, Senior Social Planner and the Child Care Lead. I do my best to answer that question. In a broad sense, we do really intend to have some longer-term capital cost estimates, ultimately with all the facilities that will be opening. At this time, as these facilities are still in the development phase and still in design phase, we can't ascertain a very specific amount at this point, but the city does, and we will intend to apply a formula which looks at a ongoing maintenance and replacement costs for the facility, which would be included in ultimately a
So,
future lease.
I guess for greater specificity, my question is, are we paying for maintenance because we own them? Because oftentimes we provide leases to many nonprofits who utilize city-owned facilities, and they are responsible for sort of the regular day-to-day ongoing maintenance, and this appears to be annual. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is there a different process for treating childcare differently than some other nonprofit leases, for example?
So we're in the process as a city, and this is really across all of our portfolios and looking at the lease and sustainment for all of our facilities. Childcare does have a little bit of a bubble around it because there is an opportunity potentially still to be able to glean some funding from the province as part of its $10 a day program. And the intention is that there would be some of that opportunity to do that. And we're trying to build in some flexibility in terms of the recommendations here for the future leases to be able to capture some of that.
Okay,
To
so if some
cover
of that
maintenance and renewal.
provincial funding comes in, then it could reduce the city's maintenance costs?
Correct.
Or ongoing costs? Okay. My other question was really around the recommendations coming from the Auditor General and the note around sort of, I'm paraphrasing, but sort of sole sourcing and specifically the considered expertise of the Vancouver Society of Children's Centers and the suggestion that we need to have a bit more transparency or more of a competitive tender around the downtown locations or around that operator. I'm just wondering why we didn't do that for this process, because it references in the future or other years, but we're going to be tying up these leases for a number of years. So why didn't we do a competitive process now?
Yeah, we're still in the process of scoping, hiring hopefully a consultant team to help us reevaluate our procurement process for childcare operators in the future. That does include a recommendation on how we proceed with the current arrangement that we do have, where VSOC does get the opportunity to have first priority or first right of refusal in terms of the downtown core facilities. In this case, we weren't ready yet with that policy because we hope to bring, again, recommendations to council to inform a future policy on that. The hope is that, and not the hope, the directive is that it is complete by next year, next March.
So,
And, sorry, we're at time.
Are we at time?
Well,
Okay.
Thanks. Councillor Claassen?
Thank you, Mayor. I saw my clock was starting. I know, maybe it just I saw 1:34. Anyway, just quickly, I just was curious how the approach in this plan will help us address some of the so-called childcare deserts that we're experiencing on different parts of the city, south side, east side, and also our emerging downtown strategy for finding more childcare spaces.
I'm wondering if you could give a little bit more clarity in terms of the.
No, just in terms of how we roll out these support new spaces throughout the city, how do they align with some of the questions that we've been asking about the so-called childcare deserts across the city?
Yeah. Well, I would say in this particular instance, because we're looking at the appointment of operators for facilities that are in our queue that we are moving forward with. And again, I think that this whole thing is looking at, I would say this cluster that we're discussing here today is spread relatively, I wouldn't say equally across the city, but there is definitely dispersion across the city. South Vancouver being a really key point for us. And we want to be able to work with operators ultimately that will be able to cluster to have kind of scales of economy around being able to deliver childcare in various parts of the city. So I think that there is that correlation with this idea of addressing deserts. We want to be able to build capacity in different neighborhoods. Downtown is I don't want to say it's well served, but we have VSOC, an incredibly strong operator that delivers a significant proportion of our childcare downtown. We want to be able to have that kind of strength of operation through various parts of the city, including South Vancouver.
Mm-hmm. I think I have a number. It's estimated how many childcare spaces we were short in the downtown, but that's another item that we can unpack later. What's the projected timeline for the procurement, delivery, and occupancy?
Sorry, a projected
timeline
for each of these ones. So in each of the facilities, I think generally we're looking at 2 to 3 years for some of the earliest ones, and we can't ultimately predict all of the ones, particularly when they are connected to development, but 2 to 3 years is kind of the start of occupancy we would anticipate for these ones.
Okay. Any opportunities to fast track some of these?
That's a good question. I hope that we can. Ultimately, the ones that we have control over, if there's an opportunity to fast track, we'd love to be able to do that.
Just, I know we're speaking a lot about nonprofit partnerships, but is there any part of this approach that would align with our VHDO, Vancouver Housing Development Office principles, which are leveraging private sector efficiencies to ensure public benefits?
Yeah, again, I think these are all really good questions that we're very much on top of trying to explore where there can be efficiencies in terms of delivery for one thing, but then also who's delivering childcare services. Yeah, I don't think the door is closed on any of the opportunities. We are doing some work with the downtown business community to see where we can really try to leverage things quickly and efficiently in getting new childcare spaces online. That's an example which I would say that in the next little while, that hopefully it'll serve as a template for ways that we can do similar things all across the city.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Mark. Those are my questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Before we go to Councillor Kirby-Young, can I skip over you and go to Councillor Fry? Then I'm sure someone would probably love to.
And I certainly will, once my
round.
timer could be reset. I see it's already at 2:30.
Yeah, we'll reset that.
Yeah. And wondering if we can move for a second round of questions.
That'd be great. Would someone like to second that? Great. Councillor Klassen, all those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Great. We do have a second round. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark, I'm hoping to ask a little bit about the $10 a day childcare and how it meshes with city spaces, and are they all $10 a day?
Currently, not all city facilities are $10 a day. I don't have the stat right in front of me right now, but the vast majority of city-owned spaces are $10 a day.
Okay, and Corolla, so and then city-enabled spaces that aren't necessarily turnkey city-owned, are they? How often are they $10 a day? I'm trying to get a sense of how the $10 a day ecosystem works within our approvals of daycare spaces.
Absolutely. So in Vancouver, well, I should say, we'll take one step back. In order to be eligible for $10 a day, in almost all cases, it is not-for-profits. In Vancouver, we have a significant amount of not-for-profit childcare, and a majority, and again, I don't have that exact number in front of me right now, but a majority are $10 a day, probably something to the tune of 3/4 at least, or $10 a day.
Of nonprofit?
Of nonprofit childcare in Vancouver.
Okay. And how much of the childcare is nonprofit versus for-profit? What is?
In Vancouver, it's somewhere to the tune of about 40% is not-for-profit. And again, the exact number I don't have on my.
No, that's totally
right
fine.
Now,
I know it's a very general question, and it's more just sort of prompted by some of our work in land use approvals and childcare and that kind of thing, because we do get the distinction between turnkey city and enabling a for-profit or a nonprofit. And thank you for that. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks to Councillor Fry for moving the second round. I think my clock might have been fast too, but I just want to follow up quickly on the question, and it was around, you said coming back in end of March, end of Q1 2026 around the procurement process. So it's kind of almost a year away. And I guess what I'm wondering is, do we have to leave everything status quo, or can we start doing competitive RFPs while we wait for sort of potentially more formalized or broader changes around our procurement processes?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'll take this back, this particular piece. The procurement for this began probably close to 6 months ago. So it does go a ways back. Beginning, I would say, early fall last year is when we had started this. So going forward, I would say in the next rounds of any procurement, we're happy to consider that. I think at that time, when we were moving forward, we had made that decision that we weren't quite ready to just like change how we've done things with the downtown, with the VSOC and that arrangement in the downtown core. But yeah, happy to consider going forward. And that's really the intention. And I should be clear too, with the work around a consultant, the scope that we're looking at here is relatively short. We need probably just a few months, and hopefully we can even give an update to council before we're ready to come, just as to where we're at. And then whenever we're ready for the next procurement, I think it's going to be competitive no matter what.
Great, thank you very much. Happy to move the recommendations, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Would someone like to second? Councillor Joe, thank you.
And can I speak to them?
Council, is there any discussion?
Yep.
And Councillor Kirby-Young, please go ahead.
Yeah, I really want to thank staff for this report, and it's pretty substantive because we often hear about the shortages of things that we have in the city, housing, childcare, et cetera. The number 7,000 spaces is, I think, becoming pretty well known. But to know that through the city's initiative and efforts and tenacity, quite frankly, that we have 3,000 units that are in the pipeline is pretty substantive, and approving 488 in this particular report. It's all nonprofit operators, many of whom we have existing relationships with and have done a fantastic job. And it's incredibly meaningful to people being able to work and live successfully in the city to have these childcare spaces. It's really life-saving for a lot of people. So I'm super excited to see this report. I appreciate the commentary around the fact that this is primarily a provincial government responsibility. I think council has started addressing that in some of our capital plans, but we do have the ability to offer up land. We do have the ability to do inclusionary with through developments and through cost amenities, and we do still have governing sort of CAC legislation that mandates a component to childcare. So the city definitely has a role. I think it's a question of where we begin and end and the magnitude of it. But these are badly needed spaces. These are great operators, and they're going to be incredibly welcomed by families. A number of us had the opportunity to attend the one on the rooftop of Eric Hamber recently, and it was beautiful. And there were some parents there that I think were not on the waiting list yet, but attended in hopes that they could be. A couple of my past colleagues, sporting 1 or 2 month old babies. So it was great to see the need was clearly there. The one thing I'll say with respect to procurement is really, and I'm flagging, I appreciated the responses from staff, is really for me the bigger issue that once we've been made aware that by the Auditor General recommendations, we don't have to get to perfect, and it may not just be childcare, it's another procurement too, and things around sort of fairness and harmonization in all of our city leases, that we should start making some of those improvements as we can along the way. So I was really happy to hear that back from staff too, but thank you, I appreciate the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I also would like to thank staff for this presentation and also the what's being brought forward in this report. I know that it goes some distance to address a very significant challenge we face around childcare. I'm constantly being reminded that this is the jurisdiction of the senior levels of the government, but the fact is that for the success of our city and families that live here, that we need childcare spaces, and we need a lot more of them than we're currently producing. And I know that significant work has been done. There have been motions that this council has approved, brought by Councillor Dominato and myself, that have set a bit of a trajectory for trying to improve the amount and quantity, the quantity and quality of spaces around the city. I engage in significant number of conversations with different stakeholders around the city about their needs. I bring up the downtown question once again, where we are short by hundreds of spaces at this current time, and looking for different ways to make sure that that we can work with Vancouver Coastal Health to make sure that new spaces are brought on stream in a timely manner. I was fortunately very profoundly disappointed by the fact that the provincial government did not approve our application for a innovative childcare center in Champlain Heights. That was a project that had, I think, a real opportunity to bring on stream about 120 childcare spaces in Southeast Vancouver, supporting families from Champlain Heights and the River District. Unfortunately, we're not able to move forward on that at this time because the provincial funding is not there. And also am extremely pleased to see how we are being able to work innovatively, for example, in finding home-based childcare that is safe and meets all the requirements set out by Coastal Health. And I've also had conversations with Coastal Health who acknowledge that there has been a challenge in terms of some of their work in improving new spaces, and they're doing quite a bit of work to try and improve the timelines on those things. So I think working together across communities with the regulator in the Vancouver Coastal Health and the staff work that we are doing here in the City of Vancouver, I think we will close those gaps, but certainly there are still an enormous number of families that are looking for childcare spaces, being forced to leave the city, take long trips over bridges and highways to try and drop their child off, and then having to come back to work here in the city, which is obviously not sustainable. So I look forward to seeing our progress on this one, and I think this is a very important step that we've taken today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Maloney.
I just wanted to thank staff very much for what looks like an incredible effort in trying to provide more childcare places as quickly as possible. The figures are alarming that we're missing 7,200 childcare places, that we've only got 3,000 spaces in the pipeline. And I note my colleague's comments that this is primarily a provincial government responsibility, and that we really do need to do more. And during the election campaign, I knocked on thousands of doors, and every time there were parents, they were deeply distressed about either not being able to get childcare, having to travel a long way for childcare, or having friends moving out because they couldn't find childcare. It's a huge economic productivity issue. I think that there's a certain element of trust that's been, a certain element of disappointment amongst parents, and I note that ABC did promise in the election campaign to provide 5,000 new childcare places. And while this is primarily a provincial responsibility, it's another promise that was really overpromised during the election, just like the 100 mental health nurses. And I think that it's worth being a bit circumspect about
Sorry, Councillor Maloney. Sorry, is there a point of order here?
I have a point of privilege, or sorry, a point of procedure, if I might. I think it's 8.7 around pursuant to conduct in the chamber, and I think it says that you should not cast aspersion on council members, and we usually don't have political rhetoric. We usually focus on the merit of the issues at hand. This would be a first if we're going to start doing this in this chamber.
Great. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to leave it there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. And echoing my colleagues, thanks to staff for their work on this report and recommendations to council. Certainly as a parent, I can say with some certainty and assuredness that after trying to find a home in Vancouver, that the next hardest thing was to find adequate and safe and quality childcare for my daughters. And it was process of rigor. I had a spreadsheet, as many people know who've heard me in council before, with all the list of different childcare facilities I applied to, which included fees. So you had to do an application fee, and then you had to follow up to see if you've obtained a space. And in some cases, and I was one of them, I got a space once my daughter was in school, so it was a little late. But I was fortunate to find some really quality childcare, but it is one of the hardest things as a parent because you want your kids to be safe and you want them to be in a quality environment, and you're entrusting them to other people when you go to work, so you can pay your rent or your mortgage. And I would say after housing, it was also the second largest cost I had in my household. And so there's a cost, and I know we now have $10 a day, but so But just the provision of these spaces is really important. And we were at Eric Hamber, a number of us last week, celebrating the opening of the rooftop childcare there. It's fantastic. I talked to a number of parents there who have 2 or 3 kids, in many cases 3-kid households. And so having the ability to bring your other children to school and then have daycare in the same location, so you're not having to do multiple stops, which I also did as a parent, is really helpful to families. And it was referenced the shortfall of 7,200 licensed childcare spaces. I do appreciate that with this report, that with the 3,000 spaces in the pipeline, that's going to reduce that shortfall, and that's important progress. And I think it's actually important to celebrate that we're making some great strides. And also noting in this report that while a number of the spaces will be downtown, a number of them are outside the downtown core, which is also addressing gaps for families. So overall, I'm really pleased with what we're seeing here, and thanks staff.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else in the queue, I'm now going to call a vote. Can we please go to the voting panel, and can you please register your vote? Great, and that passes unanimously. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm wondering if I might ask for a reconsideration of item number 1. My colleague indicates that she was not present and unable to vote on it, so would like the opportunity to vote on item number 1. So if we could move a reconsideration of that.
So it just goes seconded, then we approve it, and then we reconsider. Okay. Yeah, can we have a seconder? Councillor Clausen, thank you very much. Any discussion? Great, so we will vote on the reconsideration of report number 1. Can we just do yeas and nays, or do we have to register the vote? Yep. All in favor say yay. Okay. All those opposed say nay. Great. It's going to be reconsidered. So now, clerk, do we put no discussion, whatever? Okay. So we are going to be voting on report number 1 again.
I did nothing for you.
So if you can please go to the voting panel and register your vote.
Yes. Yeah, a Canadian heritage moment.
Great, and that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna go back to the next report, which is number 3, the 2025 Municipal By-Election Review. Before we begin this agenda item, does anybody wish to declare a conflict of interest? Seeing no one there, this item does have a team member presentation. We have team members here to present this item, unless people want to waive it. All right.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Katrina Lekvik, City Clerk and Chief Election Officer. The report provided in today's agenda package is for Council's information and provides a comprehensive review of the activities undertaken for the by-election as well as lessons learned. The purpose of this presentation is to respond to Council's questions from the April 16th Standing Committee meeting. This presentation highlights the following areas for Council's attention: budget, staffing, wait times, and accessibility. First, start on budget. Last meeting, Council had a question asking why the expenses for office staff had increased so dramatically between 2017 and 2025. In 2017, we reported only the incremental costs, that is, the direct costs charged to the by-election budget and paid for from the election reserve. As elections typically draw on internal resources across the city that are funded within those departmental budgets, The total cost of the election provides a more comprehensive picture of the costs for running an election. The total cost reflects the expenses incurred by other departments supporting the by-election that were not backfilled. The incremental cost is important to note, though, as it explains the cost of running an election above any normal operating costs. This slide shows the incremental costs. The election office category includes election office staff, as well as other expenses like office supplies, meeting supplies, and administrative costs. The 2025 incremental cost was $332,000, including 3 additional roles which we did not have in the 2017 by-election, and those cost just over $100,000. There was a additional deputy chief election officer, which was added to provide support during the by-election, while also starting in the planning phase for the 2026 election. And I also note that one of our deputy chief election officers is now on leave, so this was also a succession planning role. We added an assistant election manager, which their role was to create improved online accessibility, enhance health and safety practices, and focus on training for leadership development heading into 2026. We also added a vote-by-mail assistant, and this was due to the fact that vote-by-mail is now open to all eligible voters, and we expected a higher vote-by-mail turnout. The anticipated increase in demand, which we did see for vote-by-mail, required extra staffing to manage and process the applications. It is also important to note that since 2017, staff salaries increased by approximately 20%. Finally, it's important to note that several key roles, such as the Chief Election Officer, Election and Business Services Manager, Communications Manager, Business Analyst, and Technology Lead, are part of the city's permanent staffing and not included as incremental costs. Together, these roles account for around $435,000. During non-election times, these positions fulfill other responsibilities, either within the clerk's office or other areas of the city. Another question we received from council was regarding the cost considerations used when planning an election. The local by-election is funded through the city's tax-supported election reserve. As part of the city's annual operating budget process, funds must be set aside each year to cover costs of general local elections. Since by-elections are not included in the regular election budget, additional planned allocations are necessary to ensure the election reserve has sufficient funds for the next general election. The 2017 by-election cost the city $1.2 million above normal budgeted expenses, in part due to the use of 44 free school board voting places and City Hall. The school facilities were provided at no cost to the city, as the entire school board was on the ballot in 2017. To add an additional 25 schools in 2025, it would cost an additional $350,000 to $400,000, as each voting place costs approximately $15,000. That includes staffing, venue, equipment, and training costs. Other cost considerations used for planning in 2025 were that election worker wages had increased approximately 56% since 2017. And in 2017, a fixed staffing model assigned 8 registration election officials to each voting place, resulting in an average of 105 voters processed per election official, which was about 9 per hour. At the lowest turnout location, which was Westside Baptist Church, only 242 voters were served. That averages 30 voters per election official on election day, or about 2.5 voters per hour per election official. Based on past data, election officials are able to process at least 300 voters per day per official, indicating that staff were significantly underutilized in 2017. For 2025, a more flexible data-informed staffing model was implemented using historical turnouts to guide allocation. We'll now move on to wait times. Another question received from council was why the number of voting places was reduced from 50 to 25. The number of voting places was reduced to align resources with anticipated voter turnout for the by-election. This change aimed to improve efficiency while maintaining voter access. Factors behind this decision include historic voter turnout for by-elections, the expansion of vote-by-mail program, operational efficiencies, and cost considerations. By-elections in Vancouver historically have low turnout compared to general elections. The 2017 by-election had a 10.99% turnout, and the 1992 by-election had a 10% turnout. The 2025 by-election planning projected for just under 60,000 voters, with an estimated breakdown of 8,600 vote by mail, 5,400 advanced voting turnout, and 45,000 election day voter turnout. The reduced number of voting places and increase in vote by mail was projected to serve the voter population adequately. In 2017, vote by mail was only open to voters that were not able to physically get to voting places due to an illness, injury, or disability, or if they planned to be away during voting dates. In 2021, just prior to the 2022 general election, changes to the Vancouver Charter removed restrictions, allowing all eligible voters to vote by mail. For the 2025 by-election, 6,301 vote-by-mail applications were approved, an 875% increase from the 646 approved in 2017. The 2025 planned vote-by-mail turnout was to offset in-person voting at nearly 20 of the lowest turnout locations from 2017. However, it ultimately replaced only 15 of those locations. In 2017, votes cast at the above locations ranged from 242 to 512. Some had processing speeds of 2.5 ballots an hour, which is well under the expected 25 voters an hour. As previously noted, to maintain the 2017 number of voting locations for 2025, it would have cost approximately $15,000 per voting location, or an additional $350,000 to $400,000. This expense was a consideration during site selection, given the underutilization of voting places in 2017. For the 2025 by-election, 250 election workers were hired. Of these, 150 election officials were assigned to voter registration laptops, 30 withdrew after they were hired, 45 additional were hired to replace the dropouts and increase staffing for the voting places after seeing turnout the first day of advanced voting. Each election official could process approximately 300 voters per day, with voter places handling 1,200 to 2,400 voters based on the election official numbers. As mentioned, this model was based on a 45,000 voter turnout on election day. However, the number of voters was much higher than the 300 voters per registration official, which led to long lines and delays, underscoring the need for more flexible staffing models. We acknowledge the length of time voters had to wait was not acceptable. For 2026, we will employ a number of strategies to improve wait times. The first one is larger voting places and more staff. Larger voting places and more staff reduce crowding and streamline the process. By hiring more staff, we can ensure that voters get assistance quickly and efficiently, cutting down on wait times. Additional voting equipment, including laptops and tabulators, will help voters vote as quickly as possible. Dedicated line management staff. Line management staff ensure voters are directed efficiently, cutting wait times and preventing congestion. Having staff specifically focused on line control can help maintain order and prevent congestion during ensuring voters spend less time waiting. And the last one there, exploring wait time tool. Based on public feedback, a wait time tracking tool could help voters choose when and where to vote. Staff will explore the feasibility of implementing this feature for the 2026 election. We'll now move on to accessibility. At the Standing Committee meeting, Council asked questions regarding future management of the priority access line, resources to support voters with disabilities, and languages that were prioritized. There was positive feedback received about having priority access lines. However, the long lines impacted voters' ability to find the priority access line and have it function effectively. For 2026, staff will conduct a review of voting location signage to improve voter experience and also have dedicated staff at each voting place to assist voters in line and accessing the voting place. While we provide assisted voting for all voters who may not be able to mark their own ballots, we receive feedback on the provision of Braille ballot templates, which is something we'll explore for 2026. At the April 15th committee meeting, Council also asked about communications and advertisements and use of platforms and languages other than English. Presented on this slide is an overview of the tactics staff utilized to reach multilingual voters in alignment with the city's language access policy. For the by-election, we provided voter information postcards, which were sent to 310,564 households, providing key election info in the 7 most spoken languages. We provided posters, over 8,000 of them, which included the 7 most spoken languages, and they were displayed across the city. We had over 8,000 print pamphlets and 11,700 downloads in 12 languages from the city's website. For social media, our paid content reached over 4.2 million of impressions in 12 languages. Our paid advertisements in multilingual outlets included radio and print ads in traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, and Punjabi. The above is an increase in translated materials compared to both the 2017 by-election and the 2022 general election. For the 2025 by-election, we included translations in the 12 most widely spoken languages in Vancouver for our voter information pamphlets and paid social media ads. However, due to physical space limitations on the postcards, we were only able to provide the key information in the top 7 languages as per the city's language access policy while maintaining readability. As we plan for the 2026 general election, we will continue to prioritize translating essential materials into the 12 most spoken languages. We also recognize the value of expanding our language offerings, especially in print formats. Staff will explore the feasibility of using a larger mail-out format to enable additional languages to be incorporated while maintaining clarity and accessibility. Building on the feedback from the 2025 by-election, staff will conduct a full review of election delivery. This includes evaluating voting places, both for advanced and general voting days, as well as staffing levels. Looking ahead to 2026, the election office plans to increase the number of voting places and expand the successful supercenter model introduced in 2022. These larger locations feature more staff and additional voting technology to improve the voter experience. In 2022, 68 of the 82 general voting day locations were supercenters. For 2026, the plan is to have 28 of 30 advanced voting locations and 80 of 84 general voting day locations set up as supercenters. This expansion is in direct response to rising voter turnout, especially during advanced voting. And I just note that the 2026 locations are not yet finalized. To support this, staff will model various turnout scenarios to better understand potential impacts on queuing and wait times, allowing for proactive resource planning. We are also exploring improvements to the in-person voting experience, including, as I mentioned, a real-time wait tool for voters, dedicated line management staff, clear signage, and enhanced awareness of the priority access line for all voters, for eligible voters, excuse me. Staff will return to council with a full plan for the 2026 election. I'll now take questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks very much for the report. I spent a lot of time going through this one because I was trying to, between the different tables, try to look at sort of a holistic summary of information. And I think what ended up really standing out for me, and I'm trying to best understand, was our fundamental planning flaw. You had stated that voting places were reduced to align with voter turnout. However, when I look at page 5 of the report, it shows that the planned voter turnout on election day was actually higher than in 2017. And it shows it would have been 45,000 out of 43,831. So I don't understand how we square, if the turnout was higher, that we reduced voting places because we thought it would be lower.
We were anticipating the vote by mail would have a higher impact on the overall voter numbers.
But even with the vote by mail, you still showed election day voters being higher than in 2017. Correct? Anticipated.
Yeah. Just in terms of the voters processed per election official, in 2017, it was 105 per election official per day, whereas our projection is 300 per election official per day.
I'm not sure how that speaks to the question. We have more voters. Don't we need to have at least an equivalent amount of places for them to vote? I'm going to move for a second round, Mayor, because I think this is going to take a bit longer.
Great. All in favor? All opposed? Great. Second round.
Go ahead.
I could come back on that question.
Okay. I guess my other question is, the report cites that the voting places were reduced due to budget concerns, and it would cost potentially $300,000 to $400,000 for those spaces because the school board was not part of the by-election, so therefore did not provide the schools, and they'd have to be rented. So my question there is that we appear to have some historical reference information where we come in under budget. In fact, while the estimated budget was $2 million, we came in about 1.2 of incremental, and the rest was absorbed, which seems to be pretty similar to past elections. So again, if we were expecting a similar election day voter turnout and we had budget, why do we make that decision? Budget's an issue. We put more money into staff, but we decided that we were going to cut out budget for voting places.
I think the thought there was just that the processing speeds were quite low. The sites weren't seeing that many voters, and the historic turnout is quite low. We anticipated that they would be more efficient. The sites would be overall more efficient.
How would they be more efficient if there were less of them and they were smaller spaces? Because we also had them in smaller rooms, apparently, because the report cites that the lead time did not allow us to get the larger gymnasiums, community centers. So a lot of them were upstairs, smaller rooms.
Yeah, we do recognize that the smaller spaces did not work out as planned. That's why we're planning for the larger super centers.
Okay. A couple more questions. I'm wondering why the report seems to stop short in the language, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to stop short in the language of actually recommending there's 2 advanced voting days that are provincially mandated and in the Elections Act, and it talks about sort of maximizing opportunity through efficiency or the size location. But why, if we know that people at all levels of elections, provincial, federal, et cetera, are voting more early and often, why did we not specifically recommending expanding the amount of advanced voting days?
I think at this point in hindsight, it would have been a good idea to increase the number of advanced polling stations. Again, historically, we've seen by-elections have had low turnout. It's difficult to predict in advance of an election when and where exactly people will vote.
Just to clarify, I'm asking in terms of going forward, because I'm speaking to the content of this report that suggests changes we're going to make, and I don't see an explicit suggestion about expanding the number of advanced voting days for 2026.
Sorry, I spoke to that in the presentation. Just one sec. So in 2022, we had 22 advanced voting places with 5 advanced.
Sorry, Katrina, not places. The number of days. There are 2. There were 2 at City Hall, and it says that the provincial legislation requires 2.
Right.
And
okay, sorry.
The report moving forward does not seem to suggest more than 2 advanced voting days in 2026.
Sorry. Yeah, 2022 we had 5 advanced voting days, and we're not anticipating to expand the number of advanced voting days. Only the number of advanced voting sites.
I'm going to come back for clarity on that because that seems to contradict the report. Thank
you. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor, and thanks, Katrina, for being here. I had mostly questions around, I guess, how people are voting, so I want to spend some time on that. I was wondering if there's been any consideration to including a mail-in ballot with the voter information postcard that goes out to all households. I understand that all households receive that voter information card in Vancouver, so I'm wondering if it's feasible or if there's anything that would prevent us from sending a mail-in ballot with that.
Yeah, when a mail-in ballot is requested, we strike them off the voters list, so it's having shown that they voted. So if they just change their mind or they decide not to vote, they've been issued the ballot. So we do it on a as request basis.
Mm-hmm. But there's no requirement in the charter to do it that way, I assume. Like you could strike them off the list when the ballot comes back completed.
Yeah, I'd have to double check on that. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
That's our current process.
Okay. Has it ever been considered though to send out a mail-in ballot to everybody?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. What about digital voting? Just wondering if there's been any exploration of that in Vancouver.
Currently, we're not enabled to do that under the legislation. Have we? I don't think we'd have to ask the province for a legislation change
Okay, so we're not able to do it under the charter, or is it provincial legislation?
under the charter. Yeah, under the charter.
Okay. Another question was around VSB facilities. So I understand that we get park board facilities for free. Is that right?
Yes.
So why are we subject to a rental fee for VSB? And has there been any efforts at negotiation to get that fee down?
During a regular general election, when school board is on the ballot, there is no rental fee for school board facilities. But during a by-election, when there is no school board on the ballot, then we would be subject to the fees. So they
What's the fee per venue?
$1,500. About approximately $2,000 for the rental. Depending on the site, it could be a little bit less or a little bit more.
Okay, so it's not a substantial amount of money in the overall scheme of the
For the rental costs, no, it's for all the other pieces like the technology and the staffing that would add up per site.
Okay, and the technology, do we own that or are we renting that?
We rent it.
Okay,
Laptops we own, but like the tabulators and that is a rental agreement.
okay, thanks for that. Was there any consideration to using, say, library locations with multi-purpose rooms like the central branch for the by-election?
No.
Okay. Any context as to why that wasn't looked at?
I think the short turnaround of the by-election causes issues with canceling programming or other things at these centers. So if we have more lead time like we do in the general election, these different groups can plan a little bit more in advance. But with the by-election, it comes down to canceling like children's programming or seniors or rec programs or other things that may be either in gymnasium or other meeting rooms.
Okay. How about enforcement of campaign materials at voting places? I heard from several people that some voters were wearing buttons for different campaigns inside the polling station and that no one was really enforcing that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah. So if somebody sees something, they need to notify an election official. Typically, it's the folks on site that are managing that. If we get calls to our main office off-site, we may send like a sector manager or call the site to go and inspect what the complaint is. The challenge this time around, of course, was everyone was so busy that we didn't really have anyone to go and assess the situation, I would say.
Is it because of the short staff or because of the turnout?
I think it was, if there was less people at the polling stations, the staff that were doing election official duties could have been roaming or doing other things that they typically do. But because we had to put everybody onto computers to process voters, we didn't have those extra staffs, which is why we're recommending or planning on for next election to have like a line management staff. We're also meeting with security to assess any other steps we can take to better manage those complaints.
Okay, but you're aware that that was an issue?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Orr.
Thank you very much for the report. I noticed an article online in City News that used the words voter suppression. I think that is a bit of an extreme, but it does cite that there was 33,000 people that were unable to vote. Is that accurate? 33,000, or was that included in the report? I didn't see that in the report. So.
Yeah, we don't have any data on persons that may have left without voting.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it's interesting to see this article cite 33,000 people were unable to vote. But yeah, echoing the concerns, just what I heard from people were that the same parts, the same communities that feel underserved by community centers in the first place were also underserved by the voting locations. But I also wanted to ask if we're moving forward, are we just sort of trying to maintain these levels, or is there a plan to increase voter turnout? Are we expecting to try and go further than just not have people wait 3.5 hours? Are we trying to increase voter turnout?
I think that's a tricky question. We can plan for higher voter turnout, but in terms of increasing voter turnout, I think our role in the election is educating and providing the information for folks to know when and how to vote. I think there's a lot of factors that could influence voter turnout, so it's difficult for us to necessarily try to do things to promote it. I think, again, our role is to educate and let folks know when, how, where to vote. There's lots of variables there, I think, that would impact whether or not folks would come to the polls.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks very much for this report and presentation. Can I ask, Katrina, has there been a debrief with our teams at the voting stations to hear their possible insights and suggestions of what could have been done better?
Like the election officials at those sites? We did receive feedback from a number of folks working in the sites, but we did not actively solicit feedback. Oh, sorry, no, correction. We sent out a survey to seek their feedback.
Okay, but not actually, okay, so that sounds like it was more voluntary if they wanted to come forward, but not actually talking to our teams to find out how they could, things could.
Correct.
So do you think that the election office was, or did not adapt quickly enough once the high voter turnout at the advanced polls was clear?
I think the challenge at that point is there's only so many things we can do. We've already advertised the sites as per the legislation. We already have all our tabulators on site. Even getting laptops in was problematic because we need to get them imaged and that kind of thing. The staffing, we did secure more staff. So we did do some things to, but it made a bit of a dent only.
Sorry, Katrina.
Yeah, no problem.
Just kind of the report admits a staffing model underestimated per official voter load. So are the current staffing models too rigid to respond to unpredictable by-election dynamics?
I think we just need to plan for higher turnout overall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all we can do. Just the lead time, everything needs to be prepared pretty far in advance. That's the biggest challenge. We can't necessarily adapt once we see.
So throwing more resources at it seems to be what I'm hearing from you, not necessarily a change in strategy and how we deploy the resources.
I think we are having a bit of a change in strategy, like having the increased sizes of the increased number of the super centers, adding a few more locations for both advanced and general voting days. So I think that is a bit of a change in strategy. Yeah.
Would it be possible that if we had quicker voter registration, more staff to do the registration within the polling stations, that the 25 voting locations might have worked?
Hard to speculate, but if the centers were larger, it might have had a bigger impact, like if they were all super centers, for example. We'd have to secure bigger facilities and have more equipment and more staff, of course.
So just, again, thinking long-term, how sustainable are city-led elections model in our large center like Vancouver? Because we throw a lot of money and staff at this, and it feels like it just keeps growing by leaps and bounds.
Do you have anything to say? Yeah, we have made some changes in terms of having a more flexible staffing model where the election sites are trained to do more jobs on site. So if there are people that don't show up, or we need to shift people between sites, or if an area is busy in one spot or another, we can be more flexible. We did employ that this time around, and we will be doing for 2026. Yeah. Anything else?
So, in your view, is it given all the escalating costs and administrative burden, that this is something that a city staff, in your view, could still maintain over the long term?
Yes. Yeah, I think we're well positioned. We have that knowledge base. Our team, a lot of folks have been doing elections for a long time and have running things efficiently.
Coming up to my time, so one last question. How come we don't have any real-time wait time tracking at our stations?
I think it's been explored. We did try a tool, a test in the back end this time. There were some concerns possibly about shifting like voter preference. So if someone sees maybe a line, there's lineups at their nearby polling station, maybe they won't turn out. So we have some concerns in the back end, but I think it's coming up with something that we can set up quickly. It's difficult, like, to how do we get it reported? I think we have to look into like the technology there and the options to do the reporting.
Simple to me, but that's my time. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Councillor Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Also, thanks, Katrina and the team for all your efforts in this by-election. Also, all your time for creating this report. So questions, I saw in this report, 30 out of 250 people withdrawn from, before the election day. What are the reasons why they are quitting the job?
Sometimes illness, and some folks did get called for the federal election, so they were on that call list and decided to step aside. Any other? I think that those are the main reasons.
So there's nothing about political reason why they are leaving, just...
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Other question is, what do you think the appropriate or the target wait time could be in the 2026 general election? What will be an acceptable level of wait time?
That's a good question. It's difficult to say. I mean, the wait times that we did see were obviously unacceptable. I don't think we have a number in mind at this point. We can report back on that in our 2026 planning.
Okay, so to follow up on that, is there any discrepancy in terms of the wait time by different charge stations? Because what I heard in general, the wait time is really long, but in some area, in the east side especially, where I vote, I only waited for 5 minutes.
Right.
So why there's a discrepancy in terms of the wait time?
We are looking at that also. Just there typically is higher turnout in the west side, and certain areas we did see, you can see in the report, higher turnout sort of along the Broadway line area. I think we also are taking that into consideration in terms of adding new spaces. East side does seem to have lower turnout historically.
Okay, so leading up to the general election next year, are we planning to have more stations on the west side to mitigate this wait time issue on the west side?
We haven't confirmed all our numbers yet, but yes, there should likely be a couple more on the west side, as well as the other location we're looking at is, what's that, the Marine Drive? River District was the other area we were targeting, as there's been a lot of development in that area. We haven't had our data yet from planning.
Okay, but there's no community center in River District yet.
We may look at like a church or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so other question is, so I know you mentioned that we reach out to different community using language other than English. But do we have we done any evaluation to how effective those reach out method is? Because of I did see the ad, I did see the commercial on the radio, on TV, but how effective those traditional media?
Right.
Yeah,
we don't have statistics on who shows up. But we just have, in terms of the stats on the number of hits that we got on the different platforms in the different languages.
Okay, so is there any plan to use the social media from the cultural community, like WeChat or other ways to promote the election?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we're looking into that also for 2026.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for the mail-in ballot. Do they need to register to get the mail-in ballot?
Yes.
So everyone has to go online and register that
Yes.
they can receive?
Yes.
Okay, again, so that process has other language than English?
Not for mail-in ballot. Yeah, you'd have to call 311 for translation.
For translation, so, okay. And do we know by the our ethnic group for the mail-in ballot, how many are coming from non-English or our cultural groups?
We don't have that statistic, no.
We don't, okay. Other questions, like these mail-in ballots, how can we prevent cheating using the mail-in ballot? Because I heard people can actually get other people's mail-in ballot and vote for them.
We have a very robust process, so there is various levels of identification that's required. We do have to provide a piece of ID. You want to answer this one? You answer this one.
Hi, Jessica Yee, Deputy Chief Election Officer. So for vote by mail, if they're a new applicant, they do have to provide 2 pieces of ID, just like at a voting place. There's no difference. They upload it online, and we we screen them that way. And they also sign a declaration saying that they are who they are and they have not voted during this election.
Okay, that's when they register and for the mail-in ballot. But when they receive the package, there's no other validation.
It's the same as if you go into a voting place officially, you don't need to provide any piece of ID if you're already on the list, but you do sign a declaration saying you are who you are. So same as the vote by mail package.
But how do we validate if that person is the person with the
And I'm sorry, Councillor Joe, you're at time.
Okay, I'll come back. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Katrina and staff, for the report. I have a couple of questions. I wanted to circle back on a question Councillor Clausen asked. I thought it was a timely one around the survey that you conducted of the staff who work the stations. Do you have that feedback now in terms of, or pulled that together that you can share their feedback? Or is that pending?
Yeah, we'll have to provide it after it's not yet consolidated.
Okay, so that would be circulated maybe as a memo.
Sure, we could, sure.
I think that would be of interest to hear the staff's feedback. I wanted to circle back on, we've talked a lot about there was increased interest in the mail-in ballot, and suggestion that we send ballots out with our information pages. But I'm curious, have we had, as part of municipal elections, any kind of mobile voting? What I heard from many, particularly members of our population who are elderly, including on election day, I was talking to people who were injured, had just had surgeries, were quite ill. Do we have mobile voting that go into, for example, seniors' homes or anything like that? Does that exist?
Yes, due to the time constraints, we didn't offer for the by-election, but for general elections, we do have special voting opportunities, which are typically at like those care home facilities and that. And we also have homebound voting where people can vote in home with assistance.
Okay, and so that'll be, that was in place in 2022, and that would be
Correct.
in place in 2026?
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm curious as well, I just wanted to put this question out. I don't know if we have legal staff, but I know I've sent it in an email. I have the answer, but I want to ask it on the record. Is I had a question raised by an organization here in the city that has staff who work shift work, and the question was asked whether we have provisions that it directs employers and says you have to ensure or enable time off for people to vote. It exists federally, provincially. I gather from staff, the Vancouver Charter is silent on that, but could you just confirm that for the public? Because I have that in an email.
Correct. It is in the legislation for federal and provincial elections, but not in for municipal elections.
Okay, thank you. And then I want to circle back on the subject of, there's a number of questions already raised about voting locations, the number of them, and the schools weren't used in this context. You noted that there is a cost associated with renting the spaces, but I think there was a point raised as how we considered negotiating that, and I raise it in the context of schools are property tax exempt in the city. They don't pay property taxes, so in the context of wanting to hold a by-election or a general election, I think it is actually a really good point. Could we negotiate that we not be charged and that not be prohibitive or be a barrier to offering more spaces? Is that something that will be taken under consideration?
I think, going forward, we should definitely explore all those options.
Okay, thank you. And I will just flag this as a question and consideration, is that I think the mail-in option is a good one for people, again, whether it's mobility or other reasons, can't get to a voting location. But we are on the verge of another postal strike. And I think that's something we need to factor in, is that we have no way of knowing when that might happen. If it happens, it happened just around the holiday season, that we will have to have a bit of a backup plan if that were to occur during a general election or a by-election. But it's I think quite topical right now, is that has an impact as well. And so,
It's a good consideration.
okay, that's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Katrina. I wanted to pick up, I'm trying to get some clarity around advance voting again. So I'm looking at that section in the report, in Appendix A, page 6, and I just want to clarify several points. So this one says, for example, again, municipalities are required to provide 2 days of advance voting, specifies the timing, municipality decides the other. It says 2 advance voting places were used, not days. And I'm wondering if that's a typo, and it should be days, because if you flip the page and you go to page 7, it says that the number of voting places in both of them was 1. Well, I'm just trying to get the baseline facts, and then I'll go on to my other questions. If we can do that, hopefully quickly.
There was 2 advanced voting days with 1 advanced site at each. If it says something different, then that was a typo. I don't see where it is.
So but it's the last paragraph on page 6, so that's an error then? Shouldn't say places, it should say days, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and then did I hear you say that in the general elections, we had 5 advanced voting days? I thought I just heard you say that in the first.
5 for 2022, yes.
Okay, how many are we planning to have for 2026?
At this point, we are also planning on 5 with increase in the number of locations and the increase in the number of supercenters. The exact.
5 days, but more locations. Had we considered having more days simply because I think the report also notes, and we're seeing an increase at provincial, federally, and I think municipally, of people tending to vote and wanting to vote earlier?
I think we'll take that away and we'll look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take that away.
That would be great. And then in terms of just going back to the number of locations, and again, I want to go back to this. We had 50 before, and I'm just looking to clarify here. And I thought I heard you say earlier something 80 of 84 will be super centers. So how many are we planning to have in 2026? Because again, I'm trying to reconcile, I'm hearing different numbers.
Okay, sorry. So in 2026, plan is to have approximately 28 of 30 advanced voting locations and 80 of 84 as supercenters.
So you're saying we're having 84 voting places in 2026 versus 50 that we had in the last general election?
The last places, we had 82 in 2022. 82 in 2022 on election day.
But the report that we got, I'm really struggling to try to reconcile some of this information because the first initial report we got and then this one had referenced that we had 50 total. Is that relating to the by-election and not the general election?
Correct. 2017 by-election was 50 sites.
Okay, so in the general election, it was 82 versus 84. So we're only suggesting
Correct.
2 more voting places than we had before, but we're seeing upward trends in voter turnout.
But to increase the number of supercenters, so these will be processing a lot more voters.
Okay, can you
in the
give us
same
an
amount of time.
example of a super center, how much bigger it is or where one was so we can visualize what that is?
Just one moment.
So our supercenters will be 2 to 3 tabulators, and it will go from 15 to 19 staff.
Okay, so it's more around the resources at the center, not super as in people might envision, oh, it's much bigger. Like it's a bigger
It'll be the
place.
biggest room they have at each facility,
Okay, so it's more tabulators and more staff.
as well as the biggest room, which are usually gymnasiums.
Okay, so we're going to have 2 more, but we think we can put more people through.
Correct.
center.
It'll be a lot bigger.
Okay. And that's modeling, what percentage increase in voter turnout have you modeled for 2026 compared to 2022?
In the range of 50 to 60. We're still finalizing everything.
50 to 60 turnout. How does that compare to 2022?
2022, it was 36% turnout in 2022.
Okay. Thanks. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask about Vote Anywhere. I understand that was used this time. Was that the first time that was used in a by-election? The Vote Anywhere method?
2017? 2017 was also Vote Anywhere.
Okay. Do we have a sense of how many people or what percentage of voters voted outside of their polling station, their regular polling station?
They don't have regular polling station. Because
Like where they would be, meant to
like
vote?
near their home or something?
Yeah.
No, we don't have that
You don't track that?
data, no.
I guess my question is really around if there was any additional costs or slowdowns of offering that.
It is a challenge because it's hard to know where people will turn up. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that's all I could say about that.
I guess it would be
Does
good
make it
to-
more challenging.
Yeah, I guess it would be good to know how many people used it in order to, determine if there were any challenges there. Okay. Other question was around, I guess like the big question for me is what in your eyes or in your analysis of how the by-election went, was the biggest factor in the long wait times? Was it the higher turnout in the by-election, or was it the reduction that was suggested in the number of voting places?
I think it was a combination. So definitely higher turnout. So planned sites did not work as intended. The size of the sites, I think, was one other factor. So if there was a reduced number, to have more election officials, potentially more tabulators. I mean, the ballot was pretty short for this one. And just being able to process more voters at the locations.
Okay. Do you think the tabulator is the issue with the speed of processing voters? Is that kind of the main piece of equipment that was?
I think for this by-election, we didn't run into a whole lot of slowdowns. There was ebbs and flows with the line at the tabulator, but typically it was the registration clerks, like just the processing speed of getting people their ballot. Not the clerks themselves. I mean, they were going as quickly as they could, but yeah, just getting people through the line to get their ballot. That process does take some time. If you need to register, there's some paperwork to be completed. You may need to sign some forms, that kind of thing. So that's, I think, where we saw the slowdown. Just the length of the ballot, it was under, I think it was about four to 6 seconds to feed it through if there was no issue. So of course, it'll be different with 2026, where the ballot's going to be several times longer. So that's where we are planning for more tabulators, because that's where the lines could become an issue.
Okay, so the standard is one tabulator at each voting station, and then the super centers have more. Is that right?
Yeah, we should have at least two. Yeah, at least two, and then
At all
probably
stations?
three. Yeah.
At least two for 2026?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, but just to, I guess, clarify, for the by-election that we just had, it was, some of them had one, right?
Most one, and then a few of the busier ones had two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. I understand this report is for information only. I do want to move a resolution in addition to the report.
Okay, second. I heard Councillor Kirby-Young first. Any discussion? No?
Yeah. So, hang on, I hear to see the clerk's conferring, so if we just take a minute, maybe. Good? Am I good?
I'm just going to stop your timer.
No, I don't
I'll
think
add
so.
time.
Okay, I'll just speak. I think everyone has the motion in their inbox, and I think the clerks will bring it up on screen. I think just to set the context for this is that I think we've heard from the public very clearly that they had concerns with the process of the by-election, long queuing, long lineups. In fact, we heard people who didn't actually vote as a result. And we've heard directly from staff some opportunities for improvement, and those are reflected in the report that we've received today in terms of lessons learned from this by-election, from the previous by-election, and going into the next general election. And so what I'm proposing that council affirm support for those lessons learned and changes going forward in the general election, and those are enumerated in Resolution A, and that we also request a report back in terms of pre-election readiness in advance of the 2026 general election. And then finally, that we do write the province with respect to exploring amendments to the Vancouver Charter that would extend the right to time off in municipal elections and by-elections, similar to the provisions that are offered provincially and federally. And so that...
Sorry, Councillor, can I please get you to go to the amendment queue, main queue? Sorry, just from a time tracking perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Can we... Okay, there we go. Sorry for the interruption.
So this is really to have council affirm these priorities and these changes going forward, and as well as the report backs that are noted. And I'll leave it there because I think other councillors may want to speak to it. Thanks.
Great. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, supportive of this quite comprehensive amendment. I think it does touch on a few things that would probably enhance democratic opportunities for voters in Vancouver, in particular in our municipal and by-elections. My only quibble with this might be a little bit stronger language around including French. I heard from quite a number of Vancouverites their frustration that we don't reflect that French is actually our one of our official languages, and the omission from city materials was actually quite offensive. And I just wanted to reflect that I have heard that loud and clear, and I think that I appreciate Councillor Dominato's inclusion of such as French. I would have preferred to see something a little stronger, but I think that the intention is there. So,
Thank you very much. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly, just wanted to state that I'm supportive of this additional direction in the amendment from Councillor Dominato. I think it's very thoughtful, and I think there's lots of additional direction in there that will ensure that we're more prepared for 2026. I think everyone on council realizes that it was unacceptable that people had to wait for several hours to vote in the by-election. And many people don't have the privilege of being able to stand in a line for a few hours because they have to go back to work or take care of their kids. So we need to ensure that it's much easier to vote and that people can exercise their democratic rights. And I know that all of council and staff are aligned in making that happen. And voters deserve to know that these mistakes won't be repeated in 2026. So I'm glad to support this amendment to ensure that everyone can exercise their democratic rights in 2026 and vote for their new council. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm also very supportive of the motion. I think what has really stood out for me were the two fundamental components, and Councillor Dominato and I have chatted about this at length. And my questions were focused on, which is how many advanced voting opportunities are there, whether it's the number of days, supercenters capacity, et cetera, because we just know that behavior is changing. And I think that that is a good thing because people are not reliant on having to stick with their workday per se, and they can vote earlier, provides more flexibility. And then the second one is really having enough voting places as well. Technology and staffing are a part of it, but fundamentally, we need to have enough voting locations. And I think that there was clearly, I think, a flawed planning assumption in there that, notwithstanding commentary about mail-in ballots, our own information says that we expected more voters on election day than we had in the previous by-election, and yet we had half the voting places. Very simply. So I think it's really incumbent on us. Yes, council has to stay at arm's length and the integrity of the elections process has to remain. But the buck kind of stops with council in terms of citizens if they feel, and many did fairly, that their ability to vote was impeded. And I spoke to, as many councillors did, a lot of individuals who were, it was sort of a bit like when people are looking at what's the best hospital for me to go to and what are the wait times. There was a lot of conversation of what's the wait time. A lot of people going to a station saying that they were going to go in the morning. They came back after lunch. They tried again, sort of in that dinner hour, thinking 5 to 7 would be the magic time because people would be eating or other people had, sort of cast their vote and they still had that experience. And I think that's something that we have to take very seriously, that we are providing as many opportunities for as many Vancouverites to vote as they want to. And participation in a democratic process is fundamentally a good thing. I do not think that money should get in the way of it. I don't think we should, $300,000 to $400,000 sounds like a lot to rent locations. I really appreciate the suggestion from Councillor Meisner. I don't think the school board should be charging us. They are public facilities. They do get tax breaks. I think that was a great question, but regardless, I think that was sort of is a penny wise, pound foolish decision. Because it's making a judgment, I think, about democracy. And I think there are other ways that we can make up for that. So I don't want us to be impeded, and I don't want staff to feel impeded by a false sense of economy in moving forward and planning for 2026. And so I think that what this direction does is not just receive the report for information passively, but it says that council has very clear sense of responsibility that we provide the best possible and most accessible election experience for everybody in Vancouver that wants to vote. So I support the amendments and I appreciate them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Elections are incredibly fluid these days. And I think that we are starting to see an enormous amount of pressure being put on our system of voting and elections, both locally and abroad. And I actually wrote an opinion column back in 2012 suggesting a number of electoral reform measures after the 2011 municipal election. And I'm pleased to say that quite a number of those recommendations have been since implemented. So I'll be very pleased to support this amendment because I think it forces us to look differently and adapt when things don't go well, and or also makes us more resilient in the face of potential threats to our very important system of electing people to office. So I am be very pleased to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maloney.
I support this amendment. It covers a whole lot of concerns that I have. I think just one thing about whether VSB rents out their facilities or not, and whether they charge the city or not. It's just good to note that that's a really important source of funding generally for an incredibly underfunded education system. And the point is more the opportunity cost than whether they're charging the city or not, because by allowing the city to hire school facilities on election day, it means that they can't get their normal sources of income. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thanks. Mayor, I submitted a light amendment to the amendment, just reflecting.
Can we please go to, I guess, the amendment queue? You need the mic on, and I'm going to, perfect.
Yeah, and only just a side conversation with Councillor Dominato that we both heard of hurt from our French Canadian community that French just wasn't even included in any of the voting material. And I think in the interest of, especially as we're all united as Canadians now in the face of what's happening down south, I think it's appropriate for us to just ensure that French is represented in our work. And so there you go. Instead of just such as French, including French.
Seconded, I'm assuming, by Councillor Dominato. Okay. So, Councillor Dominato, you're on the queue.
Thanks, Mayor, and appreciate the amendment. When I raised this question a month and a half ago when we had a previous report, similarly, I raised that I had met with members of the Francophone community here in Vancouver, and that was raised as a concern. And while, no, we are not a bilingual province, we are a bilingual country. And I think for many, they felt underrepresented, even though they're not the largest population here in British Columbia and in Vancouver. And so I appreciate this amendment. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm often called upon to represent the city issues on Radio-Canada because I speak French, and there is an appreciation for being recognized. And I think to have French included in future would be welcomed by the Francophone community here in Vancouver. And so I appreciate the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else in the queue, why don't we put the amendment to a vote? If you can please go to the voting panel. Great. And Councillor Fry's amendment to the amendment passes. All right, so we'll go back to the main queue where we have Councillor Dominato's amendment. Councillor Fry, you have the floor still.
Only to say very supportive of this amendment and the amendment to the amendment, and to thank staff for the presentation and for the work, and know that it was it was a tough one, and just want to acknowledge all the work from the team that was manning the elections office and or personing the elections office, and appreciative of the work, and of course this update and reflection on how we can do better.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no main motion. Yes, so we are on the main motion. Councillor Maloney.
I would like to say that, note that one city used everything available to us to get our voters out. And there were many instances where voters were turned away. You know, we had around 200 volunteers on election day itself getting people out to vote. And that's the goal, I'm sure, of every political party, is to do absolutely everything they can to get their voters out. And it turns out that all the parties participating in the by-election were very successful at getting their voters out. I think our goal should be to try and maximise, encourage everyone possible to get out to vote, and at a minimum try to make sure that the people who do want to vote don't have any impediments in their way that stop them from voting, that make them give up. So I'm appreciative of staff's reflection and the very thoughtful questions of my colleagues, and I would like to see a plan that we can all have a look at leading up to the 2026 municipal election. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And I also would like to echo my thanks to staff for this report, and also our teams that were out in staffing our our voting stations. We could see that it was a really tough day, and clearly we needed to make some changes in response. As I mentioned before, I have written in the past about reforms to our electoral system. And I have an amendment that I would like to table now, Mayor, so we can put that on the screen, and I'll just speak to it.
We can stay in the main queue still. Now we move to amendment queue. All right. Councillor Clausen, if you can put yourself on the amendment queue, please. That's okay. I got you. There you go. Please go ahead.
The amendment is further that Council requests the Mayor to write the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs and Elections BC to initiate discussions on the potential for Elections BC to oversee the administration of municipal elections in jurisdictions with population over 50,000. So
Sorry, just can we get a seconder, please? All right. Councillor Orr, I think I saw your hand up first.
Thanks, Brent. First of all, I just want to be very clear. This is not a reflection of my view, or should it be anyone's view of our ability to do it. I actually think that there are a number of things to consider here. First of all, the provincial government, through Elections BC, already regulates every single aspect of our local elections except for the voting process. Elections are facing increasing threats. The level of complexity is becoming very clear. Every measure, I think, really needs to be considered to make sure we protect the integrity of our elections. And as our city grows, and these threats, such as the one we saw experienced by Romania a few months ago, where a president was elected and then it was immediately canceled thereafter because they discovered that there had been a TikTok campaign that had allowed that person to get into office. So they actually annulled the results of that election. I chose 50,000 as I think a very manageable. So there's 20 cities in British Columbia that are 50,000 or higher. This reflects the scale and complexity of our elections. Cities over 50,000 have more complex electoral logistics, including higher voter turnout, more candidates, and expanded use of technologies. So making them better, a centralized approach would allow us to run the elections better. This aligns with the provincial and federal models. Provincial and federal elections are already managed independently by Elections BC and Elections Canada, respectively. Extending this model to large municipalities is a natural evolution of good governance. This also reduces pressure pressure that we clearly see on local governments administering elections is resource intensive. Larger cities face challenges in staffing, training, and logistics. All of these things could be done by Elections BC and have a professional team that would be rolled out for our regular elections. Shifting this responsibility would really allow municipalities to focus on their core services. And it would promote consistency, having Elections BC to oversee municipal elections, and I think it would also go some way to improving public trust. So, and also potentially have the side benefit of improving turnout and accessibility. So with these things in mind, I remind the councillors that this is a letter. And it's a letter to start a conversation. It is not anything that beyond seeding the idea that we might start looking in future of having elections run by Elections BC for our large cities. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Montague.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm just curious, would this, I guess this is a question through you, Mayor, to the mover of the amendment here. Would this potentially include the cost of those elections?
Again, these are, I would, my response would be let's kick off the conversation with the province. I don't think the province is going to jump into this quickly or willingly, but I think it's a conversation that must reflect, again, the complexity and the cost. I think that those having, we know, for example, that a number of our staff here, once they are appointed to the elector's office, move away from their other roles. So there's a lot of turnover and change that happens within the municipalities themselves. It would be nice if there was a professional, ongoing team that the province manages that would be able to manage those elections. So yes, some of those costs would be borne by the province. And again, they regulate all aspects of our electoral system, including how we raise money, how we, all the rules associated with any kind of candidates, but they do not manage our elections, and I think that's something that we want to consider changing.
Okay, and my other question through you, Mayor, I guess would be either to our clerks or the city manager is the cost for by-elections between $1 and $2 million. What's the cost for a general election for the city of Vancouver?
Planning for 2026 is approximately around $6 million right now. We're still finalizing things.
Okay, we bear all those costs?
Yes.
With that in mind, cost is a huge issue. I don't see the harm in starting this conversation. I'm not necessarily convinced about the 50,000 as the mark. Maybe it's 100,000, but those are semantics, I guess. I do see this as another downloaded cost to the city of Vancouver, and I think maybe that discussion is time for that discussion to happen. So I'm going to support. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought behind this amendment, but I don't support it. I'm not sure that I would support it if it was specific to Vancouver even, but I certainly don't support it coming from Vancouver to initiate conversations around how municipal elections throughout the province of British Columbia should be administered for populations over 50,000. Having been on the Union of BC Municipalities for a number of years now, I can tell you that the credo, nothing about us without us, rings true. And I can tell you that a lot of local governments would bristle at the idea that Vancouver has initiated a review to have the province administer local elections. The reason we have local elections administered by local governments is in no small part because we know our communities best. And when I say we, I mean staff, I mean policymakers, I mean council, I mean our city. To have the province step in and determine how we're going to run local elections, where we're going to have voting stations, that kind of thing, and ultimately will probably charge us for the privilege somehow down the line, doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And, you know, I can't help but reflect that there's, you know, still ongoing investigations for failure to abide by the local election campaign financing rules from the 2022 election with a number of municipal parties, without naming any. And indeed, that there's a conversation about eliminating an elected board in the park board currently. All these are to say that I think this is a big step. If it was something to really, in earnest, review for municipalities over 50,000, then it would more appropriately go through the Lower Mainland Local Government Association and then for consideration of the Union of BC Municipalities, so that in fact, other municipalities and jurisdictions with populations over 50,000 would be able to opine on this proposal. I don't think it's appropriate for Vancouver to go it alone. And I'll also reflect that that is the knock that we get as Vancouver all the time, that we think we can lead the way. And it does lead to a lot of resentment from other municipalities who would rightly feel that they might have a voice in this kind of a conversation and this unilateralism. So again, appreciate that it might be something worth pursuing as a larger conversation, but involving everybody. Nothing about us without us, and nothing about them without them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I also want to ask a question to the mover of the amendment through you, Chair. Okay, so looks like the language here is really broad. I don't really understand oversee the administration of the municipal election. What does that really mean? Are we talking about auditing or operational details, like how many polling stations we should have, or like a regulation, or the I don't know, maybe the violation, the enforcement of the violation near the polling station? What exactly we are talking about here?
Thanks for the question. My vision for this is moot in this point. I would say that this is a question that we could send to both the ministry and to Elections BC to take into consideration what it would mean for us to be able to have a team deployed from Elections BC to operate our things that are going to happen here on the ground. Turning on the lights in a building, making sure that there's refreshments for staff. There's a whole bunch of things that go into planning and achieving an election day. But I would love for Elections BC, who again oversee and regulate everything about our elections except for the actual voting day. What would be interesting to get their thoughts on this. And again, I'm bringing this from the standpoint of the long-term future of our election system and the fact that there are consistent threats that are being faced by many jurisdictions. If we actually do have a crisis in a future election as a result of some kind of miscount or some kind of election interference, that would be incredibly damaging to the reputation of our elections and possibly would create more cynicism and less voter turnout. And I just want to respond to Councillor Fry's comments about having municipalities I'm sorry. Go ahead. You have another question. I apologize.
No. I mean, I think you can respond to Councillor Fry's question later. But,
okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. But I think I understand the intention of this amendment, but I won't be able to support that. Because the reason why I think, as the mover of the amendment mentioned, that it's really broad. I don't know exactly what we are asking the province to do here. So I think also we are asking the province doing a lot of things, housing and other things. I think this is not a priority for them. And so for that reason, I would like to see a more explicit, more specific ask, so that I can support about this amendment. But now with the language written here, it's too general, and I don't know exactly what we are voting for here. So with that, I'm not able to support this amendment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to state that I do appreciate the idea and where it's coming from. And I think Councillor Klassen's intention is to improve local elections in Vancouver. But from my perspective, and to Councillor Fry's point, I really agree that no one knows Vancouver like Vancouverites and our staff. And you have a lot of those key relationships that are necessary to conduct a general election or a by-election, including relationships with vendors, including relationships with venues, and also your deep knowledge of experience of past elections and maybe some of the pain points or areas for improvement. Shifting that over to Elections BC, I think would be a pretty rocky road for the first few elections, and I don't think that's what we're trying to do here today. I think, your best city staff are best placed to manage these local elections, and I think also we need to keep things in perspective. Yes, during the by-election, there are certainly some areas for improvement, and staff have also identified those, and I know we're going to work on that. But thinking back over the last, few decades of local elections that I've followed, I would say they went very efficiently and smoothly. So I'd like to continue to work to refine our processes and approaches, and I do feel really good about the amendments that were brought forward earlier in order to improve the readiness for 2026. So I'd like to continue that approach. And as a result of that, I'm unfortunately not able to support this amendment, but just wanted to put that on the record that I support continuing with the city leading general elections in Vancouver. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clausen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. And I'm sort of sensing a theme here, but I actually am really pleased that we're able to have this discussion here today. Whether we do it today or whether we do it down the road, I think it's inevitable at some point that we're going to see oversight by Elections BC for local elections. And whether it's done through the support of delegates at a UBCM conference is to be seen. But I think, just responding to what I'm hearing, I think it kind of almost, it's a bit of a contradiction. We don't ask Elections Canada to live in Whitehorse or Valemount or like a local community where there's election. For a Canadian election, we have a centralized body that looks after elections for the entire country. Same for the provincial elections, BC. And so I would say that at the local level, especially when we're talking about larger cities, if you start getting to smaller cities, maybe some of those kind of details around the local area might be a factor. But it's so important that we have independence with our electoral system. And so having an independent body like Elections BC to run our elections, I think would take away, again, potential challenges that we might be seeing, again, with so many elections being under threat as they are right now. But again, I'm very glad that we've had this conversation today. And if this amendment is not supported, I'm fine with that. But I'm really glad that we're able to have that conversation about this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. And just to reflect a couple of points, I appreciate, as Councillor Clausen's alluded to in his comments, I appreciate the dialogue. This is what democracy is about, is having this discourse. And I think it is an important conversation. And I think, as we noted with the report earlier, there were public concerns about the by-election. Those have been acknowledged widely. They were unacceptable. And there are things that we need to do differently. We don't have enough by-elections in the history of the city to say there's a trend one way or the other. And so I am optimistic that staff have presented some changes that will make a difference in the general election. I do, just to the amendment, I think it's an interesting conversation whether there should be independent oversight or role in civic elections. I do think that I do take the point around us going forward with a conversation around municipalities of 50,000 or more when we haven't had that conversation with other municipalities of that size. So I think the point around UBCM is worth noting. I personally have concerns around whether Elections BC would have the capacity to undertake this work, and also concerns about the administration. It was, my colleague, Councillor Fry, noted outstanding work by Elections BC with respect to financing. I am on record of having spoken to Elections BC on multiple occasions over multiple elections. And so I'm not confident at this time that I would engage Elections BC to undertake an independent administration of our local elections. I think we do know our neighborhoods and our communities well, and I think it's just about the planning for where and how we're going to administer and having the backup plans in the event things change. So I'm going to trust our staff to do that planning work, to report back to us in advance of the general election that we have everything in place. So at this point in time, I'm not supportive of entertaining a letter to the province, but I do appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so clerk, do we have to put that one to a vote? Yeah, all right. If we can please hit the voting panel. Okay. And so the that amendment fails with Councilors Kirby Young, Dominato, Bly, Meisner, Joe, Orr, and Maloney in opposition. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go back to the main queue. Oops. There you go. Could we have saved that for a different vote? All right, Councillor Clausen, do you have anything else? No? Okay, great, thank you. All right, so I guess we're going to put this report as amended to a vote now. Is that correct? Okay. We're going to hit the voting panel, please. Great, and that passes unanimously as amended. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving along.
Mayor, I have a point of procedure, if I might.
Sure.
I'm on the queue for that. I'm just wondering if there's an interest, since we have one report left and then a few administrative items, of council to continue to finish the business versus, because I know we have a long in camera and we have flexibility when we start, versus having to bring staff and anybody back to reconvene council later this afternoon. So I'm going to look, see if there's interest. And if there is, then I would like to move that we extend to complete the business.
I do have a
lunch hour.
police board meeting at noon, so I will not be able to extend past noon myself. Supply, acting mayor. Oh, do we have a seconder? Councillor Clausen, I think you put up your hand first. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? Okay, why don't we put it to a vote? All in favor say yay.
Okay.
All those opposed say nay. Great, passes unanimously. We will continue to complete the business. Sorry, was it complete the business or just the report?
Complete the business.
Complete business. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Recess for, we'll just recess for 3 minutes. All right, thank you.
can you change the names? I'm showing up as Mayor Sim. Okay, so we will reconvene to continue on with report 4. We're going to reconvene the meeting. Great, thank you. Report back on the review of City of Vancouver committee structures and systems. Before we begin this agenda item, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare it. Seeing none, we'll move ahead. This item does not have a presentation and was held by myself for questions to team members. And I don't need to see the chair for that. Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the report. I just had a few follow-up questions in looking at the report and noting that there are a couple of motions that we have received, and there is an additional motion that has been received from one of the advisory committees. My question really is around, could you summarize further how the committees were engaged in terms of this? And I guess I share it in the context that there was a substantive review and recommendations only 3 years ago. I think that report was over 100 pages, and this report has sort of come in maybe as, by comparison, light. And this, so some of the feedback I'm hearing is there was significant work only 3 years ago and not clear on where that work went, how it was actioned, and how we are consolidating that into the recommendations in this report.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Acting Mayor Bly, and thanks, Council. Kevin Burris, Manager, Civic Agencies, and Councillor Bly, you were the chair at that meeting, I think in 2022, where we discussed that previous report. I can speak a little bit to the engagement that was done this time around. We had a little bit of a shorter time frame in which to do it, and it was done largely through survey in December, which is not an ideal month to be engaging with members of committees or the public, as people are often away. But we got about a 25% turnout response rate for the survey that we did. So we had that, and then we also did, following the survey results, we had an engagement session that also did not a large number of members were able to attend. So having said that, I would say that the engagement that we did do, the official engagement, both the survey and the engagement session, and then more unofficial engagement where we're having conversations with chairs, with members of committees, not much has changed in terms of what the committees have to say since that 2022 review. So the items that were identified as improvements in that 2022 review, we've certainly been working towards those objectives since that time, or I guess since February of 2023 when the current committees were established. But there has not been that much of a change in the issues that the committee members themselves are identifying for us.
Can you just say that last line again?
So there is not, from 2022 to now, and I would also wager earlier than 2022, there has not been much of a change in the issues that the committee members are identifying.
Right. So that is actually noted in the report in terms of the 2022 report that had significant recommendations, clarity and scope, support and training, administrative processes, resource constraints, and accessibilities. Because I think it's widely agreed upon that there's room for improvement with our advisory committees in terms of how they engage. What can you say about, from the 4 categories that were recommended in 2022, where we've seen the greatest amount of improvement based on the actions that we've taken as a city to improve those outcomes and those identified opportunities for improvement?
Yeah, certainly. I would say the 2 that come to mind immediately are, the first one is in terms of staff engagement, the processes that we have implemented since that time to make sure that when staff are engaging with committees, that we are doing lots of prep work to make sure that the committees have context, they're understanding what the projects are that are coming to them, where those projects are in their development stages, and we actually now have a standardized form that staff fill out prior to engaging with the committees. So that is one area where we have heard from the committees that certainly the process of having those staff presentations and engagements in the meetings and providing feedback during those or after those has become much easier than it was previously, where there wasn't as much tracking, and sometimes, it would give rise to feelings of being just rubber stamps at the end of an engagement process.
Okay, but these are type A committees, so this is about how they engage with council, not staff. So could you offer any?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is something that's identified in the report back, is that one of the ways in which they can convey their recommendations is by giving recommendations following a staff engagement. And so that might be a recommendation on whatever that project is that staff is working on that they then deliver to council. But it doesn't always come in the form of a, therefore be it resolved, that motion that is then circulated to council. If a project is fairly early on in its development and they are coming to a committee just for early engagement, there might be suggestions or recommendations that are made more informally in that meeting that are then incorporated into the ultimate staff report that goes to council, but that's not something that we're necessarily able to track as easily, or that is as visible to either members of the committees or to council. So essentially, through staff reports, the recommendations are getting through, but they're not as visible as when there's a very clear recommendation made and delivered to council.
Okay, I'll have to leave it there. That's my time. Thank you. Councillor Orr.
Thank you very much for the report. I think it's apropos that we're moving from talking about democracy and then into this, because I think a lot of people find that advisory committees are very much their point of access to the democratic process, and that they are working for a lot of people. And then maybe concerns around, if we're phasing out the public hearing, that this is also much needed. Just to flag a few things. The cost of these committees is budgeted at $64,000 a year, but we only spent around $34,000 last year. Is that correct?
$84,000 a year.
Your budget at $84,000, but we spent.
That's correct.
34.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a matter of cost. It's just sort of a matter of efficiency that we're talking about.
Yeah, the issues that we're dealing with, I would say in terms of the cost, when we talk about resources, that's not as much of a concern as with 11 committees, the time aspect of it is staff time, members of council's time, staff liaisons, clerical staff, that kind of capacity.
Okay, and I just wanted to ask, so the wording says, regardless of the advisory committee structure selected by Council, Indigenous Relations does not recommend eliminating the Urban Indigenous Peoples Advisory because it serves as a critical link with urban Indigenous people in Vancouver, and removing it could foster mistrust within the Indigenous community. Why did you select that, and would you say that trust would not be lost between, say, the other committees like the Renter Advisory Committee or the Chinatown Committee? Why would the trust just be lost on the Urban Indigenous Committee and not those other ones?
Sure. I would say that certainly there's a risk of loss of trust in all of those other areas. If there is a move from, very targeted committees, either centered around an issue like renting or transportation or arts and culture, or an equity-deserving community like the 2S LGBTQ plus community, there is potential for a loss of trust if that channel is removed. When it comes to the Urban Indigenous Peoples Advisory Committee, in discussing the report with Indigenous Relations staff, it was made really clear that they are such a central element of the city's reconciliation goals and UNDRIP work that it could be particularly damaging or particularly detrimental to that trust if they were removed. So that's why they're highlighted in the report. But that's not to say that that risk is not there in other areas as well.
I also just want to ask about, there's language in there that talk about misaligned with council priorities. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, certainly. So I think, advisory committees they can do a lot of things, but often we see either in Vancouver or in other municipalities, they will be used either as very broad-based public engagement that often centers around equity-deserving communities who maybe are underrepresented otherwise, or on the other side of the spectrum, they're very targeted engagement that is based in expertise and lived experience, and they are tied closely to an individual council's strategic priorities. So that's not to say that those two things are mutually exclusive, but certainly I think every municipality lands somewhere along that spectrum. And so it's really helpful for staff to understand where an individual council is looking for those advisory committees to act along that spectrum. And so when we say misalignment with strategic priorities, what we mean is that this council has established strategic priorities, and those are not always reflected in the recommendations that are being brought by committees, which is not to say those recommendations don't identify issues in the community or have merit.
Would you agree with this is actually from constituent pointed this out, that one of council's 9 priorities is to alleviate barriers to residents' well-being and sense of belonging?
Would I agree that that's a priority?
That is one of council's priorities?
I don't have the priorities in front of me, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay, yeah, just I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, and that's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor Orr. Councillor Maloney.
Some of the things I heard in relation to the last overview were that people were concerned about the quality of engagement, not necessarily the efficiency, and that we needed to invest in making sure that voices who don't usually find it accessible to have contact with council are included in these processes. But I noticed there's a project to revisit how we do public engagement and hearings and that kind of thing at SFU. Was that taken into account in this review at all?
Do you mean this? Are you talking about the public hearing work that's being done at SFU?
Yeah, but the lessons that are being learned are pretty good in terms of making contact and the voices of people who don't usually find it easy to engage with council, make it more effective. Was any of that taken into account?
Not the work that SFU is doing specifically, but certain in terms of making the committees more accessible to a wider swath of the community, and often folks who might not otherwise be able to participate in these kinds of things. There has been work done on that front, from things as kind of technological as just making virtual meetings more accessible, to providing specific targeted expense allowances if folks have to go out of pocket to attend meetings. So there has been work in that area, but we have not done any, we haven't had communication with that specific SFU project on the work that they're doing, but can certainly look at it.
And another frustration that was conveyed to me by members of committees was that they don't feel like, they don't know, they're frustrated that their motions aren't being affected, but they also don't feel like they understand what council wants them to be working on. Is there anything about this process that might help solve that problem?
Yeah, I think that you've really, going back to what Councillor Orr was saying, you've really identified what we're talking about when we talk about misalignment, which is that often the committees feel that they are bringing very valuable and potentially actionable recommendations that reflect what they are hearing in their communities, but because that is not something that has been resourced for or allocated within the city's budgeting processes or something like that, it's often difficult to then integrate. And so that creates a little bit of a wall between those two sides. So I think that, there are a number of things we can try to do to break that down, and a lot of it just comes down to improved communication, how we're communicating the strategic priorities. And we did do some work going back to the beginning of this committee term. The committees were established before the strategic priorities were finalized, which I think with the benefit of hindsight, we might have done the other way around, knowing that going forward. But so communicating those strategic priorities, we did do some work with them retroactively to go through the work plans that they had set up and basically do a little bit of not a redo, but some work to understand how their various priorities that they had laid out could connect or were connected, or maybe were not connected to the strategic priorities. So I think that is one aspect of communication, is just communicating those strategic priorities. Another aspect is then communicating the recommendations to council, because the clerk's office is essentially the vessel through which those recommendations flow. And I think we can absolutely look at some ways of doing that better. Right now, when a recommendation is made, it's circulated to members of council through email as part of the minutes circulation, usually within 1 or 2 weeks. Although if there's a really urgent recommendation, we'll do it sooner than that. But as I said before, that is not a very visible way to the public of a recommendation getting from A to B. And so we might be able to look at other ways of leveraging technology to be able to do it, whether it's a central portal or something like that, that could then be pointed to for both members of council and members of the committees and the public more widely, to say, here's where all the recommendations are, here's where they're all going, here's where they come from.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the report back and the work that went into this. I am curious in looking at other jurisdictions and models, whether you looked at the operation of the committees themselves. One of the things that I observed last term and I've observed this term is where my experience has been is the value comes from input and engagement on different issues. I think about the Accessibility Committee, for example, that provided some input into some of our policy work that led to some changes that Council adopted. But in the modeling of the committees, they use Robert's rules. It's very complex. It seems cumbersome at times. And I wondered if that was looked at, just the actual operation and discourse in other jurisdictions, because in my experience, it's almost become a hindrance to the committees at times, where they get stuck on the process as opposed to the content, and which is what I think what we've benefited from as council.
Yeah, certainly I can speak to the operations side of it. So after the 2022 improvement review report, when the new committees were established, we made sure to do, prior to them having their official regular meetings or first regular meetings, we made sure to do working sessions with them, so that if there were any procedural matters or anything like that, they could be dealt with outside of sort of the difficulty of a regular meeting. And they also took those opportunities to create some community expectations amongst themselves. So that's one element of it. As far as Robert's Rules goes, I can't remember exactly when it started, but we had started a pilot program initially just with the Urban Indigenous Peoples Advisory Committee to move to a more consensus-based model of decision-making, which takes some procedural finagling within the procedure bylaw, but we made that an option available to them, and then we did expand it out to all of the committees in this term. So not all of them have taken advantage of that. Some of them do, however, and essentially at the beginning of the meeting, they will pass a motion saying that they're going to, they agree as a committee that they'll be using consensus-based rules going forward. And it allows for just a much more discussion-based and kind of informal setting for them to reach their recommendations, as opposed to, as you said, kind of having a goal in mind but getting tripped up by the procedure that they're not necessarily as familiar with, because they are not members of a municipal council and they're not clerks.
Okay. Thank you. I'll leave my questions there, but appreciate the report.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that does bring us to the end of the speakers list. And as this report is received for information only, there is no need for a motion, and we will leave it there. Thank you very much. So we will now move to the item that was held, CD1 rezoning 4975-4997 Joyce Street. And before we move to this item, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare it. And seeing none, this item does not have a team member presentation and was held by Councillor Orr. So you have 5 minutes, Councillor Orr, to ask questions of staff.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag this just because we were having this discussion recently around what's colloquially known as the Safeway development at Broadway Commercial in terms of reducing the requirement from 20% of residential floor area to be secured at below market rents, and that this one is also at 10% of below market rents there. And just wanted to sort of flag this and see if, just to ask staff before this goes to a public hearing, if anything can be done to increase that.
I'm just going to clarify the process, Councillor Orr. So you're able to ask questions at this stage in terms of whether or not to refer the report. Questions can be related to whether or not the process has been followed to the point, but not about the merit of the actual application itself. That has to be addressed in the public hearing.
Okay, fair enough. I'm fine to withdraw that then.
No problem. That mistake happens often enough for even those of us that have been doing this a long time. So I think that's it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just ask, thank you very much, staff, for being here. I'll just ask perhaps if you could move the reporter needs a mover. Thank you, Councillor Zhou. Second, Councillor Meisner. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. So that item has been referred. So thank you very much for being here to our staff. And we will now move to bylaws. So we have 8 bylaws on the agenda for enactment. Before we begin this agenda item, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, please state that conflict now. Seeing none, we will continue. So bylaw 1 was from the public hearing on October 22nd, 2024. Council members absent for this item at the public hearing need to have reviewed the proceedings, including the video clip, to be eligible to vote. Councillor Kirby-Young, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting? Thank you. Same, Councillor Klassen. Okay, Councillor Maloney. Thank you. Councillor Orr. Okay, thank you very much. Bylaw 4 was from the public hearing of September 24th, 2024. Council members absent for this item need to have reviewed the proceedings. Councillor Maloney, have you reviewed and will you be voting? Thank you. Councillor Orr. Thank you. And bylaw 6 was from the public hearing on January 23rd and 30th, 2024. Council members absent for this item will have to have reviewed the proceedings. Councillor Fry, have you reviewed and will you be voting? Thank you. Councillor Maloney. Councillor Meisner. And Councillor Orr. Okay, thank you. So would someone like to move the motion to adopt bylaws 1 through 8? Thank you, Councillor Klassen, and seconded by Councillor Dominato. Any discussion? All those in favor say yay. Any opposed say nay. The motion carries. The list of approved bylaws can be found on the city's website. And we will now move to notices of council members' motions for upcoming standing committee meetings. Please reminder to state the title and the date. And I see we've got Councillor Dominato.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A notice of motion for the June 18th Standing Committee meeting co-submitted with Councillor Meisner, expanding the school travel planning program.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
Apologies. I'm trying to find it. Could I have 1 minute, please?
Yes, of course. I'll advance Councillor Orr, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Orr.
Yes, notice of motion declaring housing as a human right, co-submitted with Councillors Fry. And that would be for June 18th as well, Standing Committee, I believe.
June 18th?
No, sorry. Sorry, when would that be for?
June 4th?
June 4th, sorry.
Okay, so for June 4th, just make sure that's been sent into the clerk.
Okay.
Okay, any other? Councillor Maloney?
Enters by establishing a tenant advocacy office.
Okay, and that meeting will be, and that's for which meeting?
June the 4th.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, and so that completes the notices of council member motions. Yes, I did, yeah. They need to be emailed in the title and the date, just to those who have called notice. Thank you very much. So we have one item of new business on the agenda today, request for leaves of absence. This motion has been circulated to council at the beginning of the meeting, is available on screen. I'm looking for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Meisner. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Montague. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say yay. Any opposed, say nay. That motion carries unanimously. And are there any other items of new business? Councillor Dominato?
Thank you, Chair. Moving a motion under new business in my name, and I've circulated to Council a motion to reaffirm British Columbia board position with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Last year, Council passed a resolution endorsing me to serve up until June 2026. However, starting this year, FCM, as I know you know well, Councillor Bly has adopted 2-year terms starting with British Columbia, Ontario, and Atlantic. And as a result, they need to see a new resolution that extends to 2027. I have noted in the whereas clauses the provisions under which this might change in the future because we do have a general election in 2026. And so seeking council support for that extension, which would be submitted today to FCM in advance of the AGM.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Klassen. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yay.
Yay.
Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Dominato. Oh, go ahead.
Give me 1 second. Also submitting, and I've also circulated this to council, new business item, travel approval for myself and for Councillor Klassen to attend meetings with Mayor Sim in Ottawa, June 3rd to 5th. The mayor is meeting with the Prime Minister and members of Cabinet, June 3rd to 5th. And has asked that we accompany him in that work. Councillor Klassen and I will already be in Ottawa for FCM. We've already been booked to be there. And so it would be extending our stay for a couple of days to participate in those meetings on behalf of City Council. And the focus of that trip and those meetings will be to meet with the new members of Cabinet around issues around housing, infrastructure, public safety, as well as the recent mass casualty event that took place on April 26th in the city of Vancouver. And so there'll be a number of topics that will be covered, but those are the top ones.
Second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Klassen. Any discussion? All those in favor say yay. Any opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Any other items? Councillor Dominato?
No, thank you.
And great. So we are now moving to inquiries and other matters. Councillor Meisner.
Yeah, thanks very much, Acting Mayor Bly. I know that we had discussed between ourselves acknowledging the passing of an important community member. So I will start off with acknowledging here at Council that Chris Morrissey, who was deeply involved with advocacy for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community here in Vancouver, has passed. And we'd like to recognize her and thank her for her service on several city advisory committees. Chris was a lifelong advocate for 2S LGBTQIA+ rights and played a vital role in our city's advisory committees for decades. She was the chair of the Older Persons and Elders Advisory Committee for many years and then joined the 2S LGBTQ Advisory Committee a couple of years ago, which Councillor Bly and I are the council liaisons for. She also spent some time on the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. Eddie Elmer wanted me to share some of his reflections. He's the co-chair of the 2S LGBTQ committee and first met Chris in 2012 when they served together on the Older Persons and Elders Advisory Committee. He remembers her as charming, professional, and warm. She made him and other new members feel welcomed and valued from the start. And for the past 2 years, Chris has been a dedicated member of the advisory committee, continuing her longstanding commitment to civic engagement and community advocacy. She was a pioneering advocate for queer immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. In January 1992, she challenged Canada's immigration laws when her Irish-American partner's application was rejected because at the time same-sex relationships were not recognized under the family class category. Her constitutional challenge highlighted discrimination in Canada's immigration policies. Although her partner was eventually granted permanent residency, the case paved the way for legislative reform. In 2001, Canada officially recognized same-sex partners as family under immigration law. In the 1990s, Chris co-founded the Lesbian and Gay Immigration Task Force, LEGIT, in Vancouver, that's a great acronym, to support same-sex couples in navigating immigration barriers. And she later became a leader of Rainbow Refugee, an organization dedicated to helping 2S LGBTQ plus individuals fleeing persecution to find safety and community here in Canada. And Councillor Bly will continue the acknowledgement.
And thank you very much, Councillor Meisner. So happy to continue to recognize Chris, who was also a strong advocate for people with dementia. When her partner, Bridget, was diagnosed with dementia, Chris worked to make hospital services, residential care, and hospice settings more inclusive for 2S LGBTQIA plus people. Chris was also an integral member of Quirk-E, the Queer Imaging and Writing Collective for Elders, a group that uses creative writing and imagery to promote resilience and pride in aging. For all of her groundbreaking work, Chris was appointed to the Order of Canada in 2019. Even in the face of health and mobility challenges, Chris remained engaged and passionate. At the 2S LGBTQ plus advisory committee meeting in April, she was as lively and insightful as ever. Her perseverance and grace in the face of adversity were truly inspiring. Chris leaves behind a legacy of courage, compassion, and unrelenting advocacy. And she has been a shining example for so many of us in the fight for 2S LGBTQ plus rights and recognition. She will be deeply missed. Chris passed away peacefully on April 14th, surrounded by her chosen family. Over the next few months, the city will consider some formal ways to honor Chris's legacy. Thank you, Councillor Meisner. And so that brings us to the end of that recognition for Chris. And I'd just like to call on Councillor Klassen to continue on.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just wanted to speak to my own experience with Chris Morrissey. And in fact, when I saw the note, things started to get into motion a little bit about trying to do this recognition. And Eddie Elmer has been wonderful in our exchanges about this. In my former role at BC Care Providers Association, one of the areas that we spent quite a bit of time on is trying to create a more queer positive situations for care homes. And there is an expression that I only learned in relation to seniors care is called recloseting. And it was the fact that queer people, when they went into seniors care, felt that they couldn't be themselves. They could not sort of really identify. And as a result, it created a lot of sadness and hardship. And so one of the things that the care providers sought to do was an initiative called Aging with Pride. And it was a way for us to try and make sure that care homes and care providers, including home care providers, were acknowledging their work in terms of supporting members of the queer community. I had a chance, so I was introduced to Chris by Darren Usher from Dignity Senior Society, and I did a 20-minute Zoom interview of her in the summer of 2022, which is published on their website. And I came away incredibly charmed by her story and her humor and her humanity. But the thing that I never forget is she talked about how much she objected to the kind of art they hang in care homes. All these pastels and these flowers just make me crazy. I want to have real art. And I just laughed out loud, and I said, this is her kind of expressing, kind of creating her own space about what she wants to see when she's needing care in her old age. And I think she's been a trailblazer for many people in the care community when it comes to making sure that they can live with dignity in their old age. And so Chris will be missed. And I'm extremely pleased that we're all having a chance to reflect a little bit upon her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Klassen. Are there any other inquiries or other matters? Seeing none, we can move adjournment. Seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.